Alright, I know I'm a bit late to this, but today we're finally going to rank all 96 tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And you guys have been asking me to do this video for a long time. And look, I really wanted to make this video, but there was always just one problem. I started playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in 2022, which is less than 3 years ago. I've definitely become a strong player in that time, but I never felt like I'd spent enough time with each track to confidently rank them. Like, 96 is a huge number of tracks. If I talked about each track for just 1 minute, this video would be an hour and a half. And as you can tell from the video length, I'm going to spend more than 1 minute on a lot of these, mostly the ones that I really like, which I feel deserve more than just 60 seconds of attention. I actually started working on this video over a year ago, and since then, a lot of my opinions on tracks have changed, especially the newer tracks that I've now spent more time with. For example, I used to think Rosalina's Ice World was a lot worse until I practiced it, and I thought Squeaky Clean Sprint was a lot better until I played it online. Now I'd rank these in different spots compared to before, and I'll fully explain why. But today, I'm very confident in my track ranking. I love these tracks so much, and I think it's finally time to give a send-off to one of the greatest games that Nintendo has ever made. Thanks, Nintendo! Now, before we begin, here's how I will be judging each track. Keep in mind that I am a competitive player, but I'm also a huge fan of what makes Mario Kart tracks so fun and unique compared to other games. So I'll be ranking these tracks based on several factors, including the look and feel, how satisfying it is to drive, the music, creativity in the track design, whether the alternate paths and shortcuts make for interesting decision making, and overall, does racing on this track tend to be fun? I will also talk a bit about the competitive side of things, like how much strategy and luck goes into winning on a track, but honestly, I don't care that much about the competitive side. After all, this is Mario Kart. I don't want every track to be perfectly fair and balanced so we can accurately judge who's the most skilled at a children's party game. It doesn't make sense to rank the tracks that way because almost nobody in the world plays the tracks that way. I just want to have a good time, and it's okay if some tracks are really silly. Some of the most fair tracks are just boring, and some of the most silly tracks are incredibly fun, and I want my ranking to reflect that. So let's start off with the tracks that have a major flaw. Okay, let me just say that I like almost every track in this game. However, we are going to start at the bottom of my tier list with tracks that I think are just a lot less fun than the others. These tracks have obvious flaws that hold them back, and I feel like they were not really designed to suit what makes Mario Kart 8 Deluxe a fun game. So let's begin. Water Park is definitely a flawed track. Most of it is either a straight line or a very slight curve, which means not that much drifting or charging up mini turbos. There's a glider, but you don't fly over anything interesting. There's only one trick ramp, which you shouldn't even trick off of because that's slower, and the only shortcut on the track barely saves time. And for a track called Water Park, it's crazy that water physics have pretty much no effect on the gameplay. And this track could have been so much more interesting just on the concept alone. Maybe have a split path where you can go down water slides or go upside down through water streams and pipes, maybe even trick off of the heads of piantas in a lazy river. The concept of a water park is great, but the track doesn't deliver on any of that. Playing this track feels like going to a water park, but you only get to watch from the side, and that's just not very fun. When I saw Sky High Sundae in the DLC trailer, I thought I would love it. It's beautiful with great music, and then we even discovered a gap jump mushroom shortcut on 200cc. But at the end of the day, this track is just entirely straight, plus 2 turns, then just trick whenever you can. There's not that much interesting going on here, and very little skill expression. Sky High Sundae does not feel that different to play, whether it's your first time playing the game or if you are the best player in the world. What you see is what you get, and it's basically Excitebike Arena, but without shortcuts. And even then, Excitebike Arena is way more interesting than this, and I'll talk more about that later. A lot of the simplest layouts in the game are retro tracks, but those are understandable because they come from older games. Sky High Sundae is an original track, and somehow it's the simplest one of them all. Dry Desert is almost entirely gigantic shortcuts, which is really fun to discover at first. For example, there's this huge shortcut that actually lasts longer than a golden mushroom, and it's really fun to do. This stuff is really cool at first, but unfortunately, it makes the gameplay here very degenerate. Even if we ignore all the biggest shortcuts and just talk about the smallest one at the end, this is still one of the biggest shortcuts in the entire game. If you don't have a mushroom, you have to drive a disgustingly long distance to go around. And unlike other tracks with a huge cut at the end, where it's okay to not take the shortcut because you've built up such a big lead, building up a big lead on Dry Desert is nearly impossible, because the other shortcuts on this track are so big that everyone behind you can always catch up with no effort, no matter how far behind they are. And this isn't just a problem at the highest competitive level, this becomes a problem as soon as you're at the level where people just know the shortcuts on the track. I can goof off for 2 entire laps, and then suddenly I'm the only person with 10 coins and a speed item to take the win right at the end. Now, this may seem like a weird complaint coming from me, because if you know me, you know that I don't hate bagging as a strategy. In case you don't know what that is, bagging is when you stay at the back and make a comeback later. You get better items at the back, but the items are not so overpowered as to make comebacks free, so usually this takes quite a lot of skill to pull off. I'll admit it's a weird strategy, but some tracks do favor bagging, and I am mostly okay with that, because you still have to plan your items intelligently for most of the race. So that's why I have no problem with bagging in general, because what I just said is true for every single track except Dry Desert. This is the only track where I don't even use my brain until lap 3. Most bagging tracks are not like this at all, and we'll talk more about that later on as we encounter other bagging tracks. But Dry Desert is just not very fun whether you're bagging or front running. Oh yeah, did I mention front running is not even fun because the turns on this track are really awkwardly wide and you don't even get to do that much. So no matter what strategy you're using on this track, you could say that the gameplay is very dry. The best thing about Tokyo Blur is that it's really short. Okay, in my opinion, Tokyo Blur is just all the bad things about a city track put into one. So when the DLC dropped, lots of Mario Kart Tour tracks came to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and these city tracks are based on real-life cities with all their attractions and monuments. Honestly, that's an amazing idea, and I was expecting to really enjoy these tracks. However, if you play Tokyo Blur once, it's pretty clear that this is not at all designed for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Mario Kart Tour is a mobile game that plays very differently compared to the mainline Mario Kart games, so it's no surprise that the tracks will not always translate so well. And besides this one Shroomless shortcut, which is pretty fun, but also just copy-pasting from Royal Raceway, the rest of the track is just a gray road between 2 walls. It's not that fun to look at. And if you do stop to look around at the beautiful city, you'll notice that the graphics are just not good. But does the track function well? Nope. The 2 walls make bouncing items like green shells and fire flowers way too powerful, and it can all feel like luck-based chaos. The track also feels overscaled, where unless you've memorized exactly which drifts to do and when, you'll find yourself crashing into walls, because this track clearly was not designed for the drifting radius in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And what makes it even more disappointing is that Tokyo is a beautiful city, and Japan has amazing scenery. Nintendo is literally a Japanese company. Most players of this game are Japanese. This should have been such a good track, but this track just doesn't capture any of that beauty, and it's not that fun to play. Toad's Turnpike has a very simple layout, and it has cars. That's it. Now, there are some good things about this track. The music is very soothing and fits the track well, and especially when you're new to the game, dodging these cars is actually quite difficult. So in that sense, I get why the rest of the track design was so simple. But once you learn this track, taking the inside line or the middle line is basically the same thing, and there are a lot of cars, but they're not that hard to dodge once you know what to do. So you're just left with a flat, simple layout that really reminds me of Figure 8 Circuit from Mario Kart DS. I think another traffic track like Mushroom City could have worked better in this spot, and overall I just don't think Toad's Turnpike was interesting enough to bring back. Cheep Cheep Beach overall just feels a bit underwhelming. Half of this track is practically just a straight line, and even the shortcut makes you take a straighter line. I remember I actually really liked this track when I first started playing because I thought you had to avoid the water, and this path with the ramps is more difficult and way more fun. But when I found out you could just go underwater and it's way faster, suddenly the track got a lot less interesting. And the final shortcut is so tiny. What is this? Both shortcuts on this track just do not feel that satisfying to do, and the rest of the track doesn't have that much going on either. Moo Moo Meadows is our final track in this tier. This track also suffers from having a layout that is too simple. But on top of that, this is one of very few tracks with only 2 item box sets because it's just so short. Even though I don't like Moo Moo Meadows that much, I'd actually prefer if they made it longer. Items are so fun in Mario Kart. They are defining to Mario Kart, and having 2 item sets per lap just doesn't feel right. They could have even just added a single item box set at the glider, which would actually give you a reason to take this path now. The main shortcut also feels really awkward because of the inconsistent hop height and the placement of the double boxes after that. But of course, I do like that the cows are adorable, and sometimes they actually are tough to avoid. And that rounds out the major flaw tier. These are the tracks that I think are just not as good as they should be. And if you disagree with me, that's actually good. I'll be reading and responding to a lot of comments on this video, so come tell me why you disagree. I fully expect to have my mind changed on some of these tracks. Everyone has a different perspective, and I may be underappreciating some tracks because I'm just not thinking about it in the same way that you are. So don't let me continue to dislike a track that's actually good. You should tell me why it's good. Okay, now with the bottom tier out of the way, let's talk about the tracks that are just okay. This section will be a lot faster as I don't have that much to say about these tracks. I don't think they have any major flaw that holds them back, I just don't think they are that interesting. London Loop was the first city track where I actually struggled to memorize which way to go. There are just so many blind ramps with a turn right after, and I quickly figured out that it's just always a right turn, and that really helped me. But I feel like if I cannot memorize the track layout, that's because the track just doesn't take me to interesting and memorable places. We just kind of make turns for no reason. And besides the grassy areas, each section is really not that distinct and memorable, so the whole track just kind of blends together. Berlin Byways is slightly more interesting because the cars add difficulty, but this was always a tough one to memorize as well, and I think it suffers from the same issue I have with the London Loop and with many other city tracks. A lot of the turns are just not that intuitive or comfortable to take because, again, this track was not designed originally for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. At least for both of these tracks, I think the music is really good. New York Minute is another city track that is just not that interesting. The first shortcut is super small and hard to see, and it looks like you can cut off a lot more than you actually can. It's tiny! And the other grass shortcut looks like it's exactly what you think it's going to be, but if you use a mushroom, drifting through it gives you a really awkward line where you can hit a wall that you couldn't even see was there beforehand. It is neat that you can do this without a mushroom, but it's such a small shortcut and it doesn't even feel that fun to do. I just feel like besides this one section near the grass where the road is a different color, everything I'm seeing on this track is all the same. These 3 city tracks really feel like you have to memorize them first before it's any fun at all. And that's not always a bad thing though, because once you're an expert at a track, often that unlocks fun techniques that you can do to go even faster. But for these tracks, that's just not the case. The fastest way to drive them is pretty standard, and so what you have is 3 tracks that are punishing for beginners and not rewarding for experts, and nothing that interesting happens on them. I think the Animal Crossing track is just okay, and it was a missed opportunity to show off more of Animal Crossing, especially for a track that is partially meant to promote and celebrate another game. It feels like someone asked, what if we put a racetrack in Animal Crossing? Which is cool, I guess, but I think someone should have asked, how can we use the concepts from Animal Crossing to make a fun Mario Kart track? Imagine if you could take the glider from one island to another island with different themes and different weather. There could be a farm, we could drive through a river and see fish, or drive through a museum. This could have worked great as a section track, where each lap was a different island or a different part of an island. But as it stands, the track is pretty basic. It has some unique elements, including that there are 4 possible seasons that you can play on, but I don't feel like any of these unique mechanics make for very exciting gameplay. Peach Gardens is a big rectangle. There, I said it. I thought I was going to rank this track higher, but then I just kept thinking of tracks that are better than Peach Gardens until it ended up near the bottom. So I started thinking about what made me like this track in previous games. And honestly, it was the challenge. There were 2 sections with huge, punishing grass patches that were tough to avoid, and even the hedge near the end was challenging to get around just right. But all of that is just gone in this version, and Peach Gardens is now super easy. On top of that, the reversed lap 3 just makes this track way too long, and it puts the shortcut at the end of the lap instead of the beginning, which turns this into a bagging track focused on the final shortcut. So instead of being a highly technical front-running track like it always was, it now just kind of plays like Dry Dry Desert. But obviously not as broken as Dry Dry Desert. The only tech that we have on this track is hopping through the shortcut, which is fun, but not that important, because unless you're literally in first place, you're gonna be fishing for mushrooms to take this on lap 3. Oh, and also giving Luigi a high five for good luck. This works every time. Even in the most dire situations, this has helped me win races. Choco Mountain is a pretty simple track. There's nothing here that is very difficult or interesting, and you kind of just follow the road and do the most basic mini turbos. Even the falling rocks are not a threat because you can just take the fastest line and you're safe. Both shortcuts on this track are very small, so there isn't too much comeback potential either. Honestly, a lot of the fun on Choco Mountain comes from the cramped space, which makes item play very important. But I feel like this is already true on many of the more interesting tracks, so there's nothing really special about Choco Mountain. Merry Mountain looks really cool, and I enjoy that there's a train and you can actually take the train tracks as an alternate path for coins. This track looks beautiful, but the gameplay is very reminiscent of Water Park. There's a lot of straight sections, 1 wide turn, and 1 sharp turn. At least the sharp turn has a huge shortcut on it, and this keeps the race very dynamic as all you need is a single mushroom to pass a few racers. Piranha Plant Slide is a very difficult track in the first half, and I feel like that's what makes it fun to play. However, it does feel a bit awkward to drive, as the little bumps in the road can send you into the air or into a wall, and it's really weird that you cannot trick on anything in the section with the floating blocks. And then when you can trick on the little green pipes, you actually shouldn't, because it will send you flying off the track. A lot of the beginning section feels like I just memorized what to do, but none of it is that intuitive, and it doesn't feel that rewarding. It doesn't feel like I'm going super fast because I know what to do. It feels like I'm just avoiding the janky track design because I know what to do. And then the next section is just Water Park again. Like, we're not using water physics, we're just taking a really slight turn. But what does make it more interesting is that there's a shortcut at the end of the track. This track is rewarding for good players who master the beginning section, but that's kind of my only praise for it. The rest of it is okay, but not that interesting, and the whole track can feel unreasonably awkward to drive for newer players. Alright, thank you for bearing with me through the negatives. Now we're finally at the part where I can confidently say that I really like the rest of these tracks. So next up, we have the flawed but interesting tier. These are tracks that I think are definitely also held back by their flaws, but I still do like them because they have a unique idea that makes them different from other tracks. In that way, you always get a very different experience on these tracks. And I think it's important to commend these tracks that go for something that other tracks don't even try to have, even though they have their flaws. I want there to be a great variety in track designs, and naturally, that means the designers of these tracks are taking some risks. And part of taking a risk is accepting that the result won't always be a success, and that's okay. I'd rather have lots of interesting yet flawed tracks rather than a bunch of tracks that are just okay. Bangkok Rush starts out really interesting with a water stream and trickable boats, followed by 2 split path sections that branch into several other paths. And every one of these paths has their own uses and risks. But then right after that, we spend most of the track just driving on an awkwardly shaped road with 2 walls on the side. It just becomes a completely standard city track. At least there's a shortcut that is only accessible by glider, but then Madrid Drive came along and ended up doing that concept better. This could have been so much more of an interesting track if it explored more of the split path concept, but ultimately it just ends up being a standard city track for most of it. The music on Rock Mountain is just incredible. This is definitely one of my favorites. It really sounds like you're about to go on an adventure, and then you go through the cave, you exit, and you glide over this beautiful... Okay, they kind of failed on the execution here. But imagine if this looked way better. With how the DLC tracks went for a more cartoonish design compared to the base game, I don't think that worked very well for Rock Mountain. If I'm gonna be on a glider for half of this track doing nothing, at least give me something more interesting to look at. Another failure in the execution is that front running on this track is just really boring, honestly, because so much of it is just a glider. Not only is bagging and taking shortcuts way more fun, it's also more rewarding because the shortcuts are huge. All you need is triple mushrooms and you can take a massive shortcut, and taking this on lap 3 is pretty crucial to winning. I wish they added more stuff to do as a frontrunner, like gliding through ring boosters that we have from Mount Wario, or maybe make it so that you can take some of these shortcuts shroomless if you're in a glider, but oh well. However, for how much of a bagging track it is, it's really funny to me that this track has so much gliding that the combo with the fastest airspeed can actually front run really well here, especially with how the glider and boost panels help to mitigate damage from getting hit. When I was doing the max glider speed video, I tried for hours just to get Rock Mountain, and when we finally got it, I just won instantly. Like, it was free. It's actually really funny. So Rock Mountain is unique, it's got great music, it favors different combos unlike most tracks, but in a lot of ways, it just wasn't that well thought out. Kalimari Desert is a very interesting track. It's super open, which means your snipes have to actually hit. You can't just bounce it off 7 walls and get lucky. And each lap is different, which I think is a very fun variation on what was originally just an okay track. Now, my main issue with this track is that the driving feels very dull. Most of the track is just a super wide drift, which is slightly more fun on 200cc, but just like on Rock Mountain, it's simply more fun and more effective to bag and take big shortcuts. Now, it might seem like I'm being a bagging hater here, but I have no problem with bagging being better on a track or bagging being more fun on a track. It's just that anyone can choose to bag at any time by just slowing down, right? No matter what track you're on, it takes some level of either skill or luck to be in first place. So I think the track should reward you in some way. Now, I'm not saying front running always has to be better, I just want it to at least be somewhat fun, because like, what am I doing up here in first place if it's boring and I'm gonna lose? So yeah, it's just really unfortunate that there are these bagging tracks where being in first is not only less effective, but it is also just not that fun. At least bagging isn't completely overpowered here, otherwise I'd rank it with Dry Desert. Excitebike Arena is one of the most exciting tracks in the game! Close your eyes, hold A, and shake your controller! On the surface, this track is very, very basic. Not at all exciting like its name. But the better you get at it, the more fun this track becomes, as there are lots of advanced techniques and the layout of the ramps randomizes every time in versus mode. So unlike most tracks, you actually have to improvise to be fast. And it's quite a balanced track, where it takes a lot of skill to maintain a lead, but comebacks are still possible because of the shortcuts. So Excitebike Arena rewards you for a variety of skills. I would say that this track is actually one of the most balanced tracks competitively, and if I was only judging this track based on high-level competitive integrity, I could definitely rank this one really, really high. But the fact is, most people will only experience Excitebike Arena as a track that is just a straight line with tricks, and until you're at a very high level, you're not going to be able to do all the advanced techniques consistently or even faster than just driving straight and tricking. So for most players, this track is just not quite as fun as the others. Sweet Sweet Canyon is fine, but I feel like it could have been so much better. I just feel like nothing on this track is that appetizing? Okay, that sounds weird, but that's kind of what I want out of a sugar-themed track. The colors are so muted, and I get that the water is like supposed to be sugar water, but it's just kind of brown, and I don't know, I don't like that. And the whole track just has this yellow tint in the lighting. Oh, and the layout of the track is not that great. It's just alright, but that's not even the point. The music is good too, I guess, but every shot of this track looks like the food is going stale. You hop into the canyon expecting to see a mountain of desserts, but it's just one brown thing surrounded by bright yellow liquid. Like, I don't have to explain why that just doesn't feel right. Sky High Sundae definitely executed on the colorful food theme better, but I would say the art style there also looks a bit plastic and not like real food. I just want the bright colors of Sky High Sundae with the more realistic art style that Sweet Sweet Canyon is going for. The concept is really cool, I just feel like they really messed up the execution, which makes this track a lot less memorable in the end. But I will say the final shortcut is very fun, and that's the only reason this track is any good. Donut Plains 3 definitely gets a lot of hate, especially among competitive players. Now, on the surface, it looks like this track should be extremely fun and unique. There are so many shroomless shortcuts you can take, and they're actually quite difficult and satisfying to do. There are multiple routes depending on if you want coins, items, or the fastest path, and all of this sounds really great. But the problem with Donut Plains 3 is in the details. There are only 2 item box sets, and if you look at where they are located, you need to skip the 2 biggest shortcuts on the track to get them. This means that the fastest path through the track gets you 0 item boxes. Also, there is no item for the entire second half of the lap, so if you get shocked after the boxes on lap 3, which is really common, you will get trampled on your way to the finish line, and there's actually nothing you can do about this. But these particular criticisms are mainly for a high level of play. Now, I'd love to be fair and say that Donut Plains is way more fun at a lower level, but unfortunately it's just not. The track feels very awkward and punishing to drive at first, and once you're finally good at it and you can take the shroomless shortcuts and it starts to get fun, you'll quickly reach the level where it's suddenly all about how well the ending goes. It's definitely a unique design, and I've had a lot of fun on this track, especially in time trials, but I just feel like the way it plays online, you don't get that many items, and the items become way too important right at the very end, so there is a lot of luck involved. Yoshi Valley has a lot going on if you just look at the minimap. I love that there are 6 alternate paths all at once, but I just wish more of them were actually useful, because pretty much the only 2 useful paths are the bridge, which is the fastest, and the left side tunnel if you want coins. The entire right side is pointless because those paths are just too slow. you can already get coins on the left side, and if you take the cannon for an item, you actually lose 5 seconds, and there's like no item that can make up that time difference. And after the split path section, the rest of the track is not that interesting. It's fun to charge up these mini turbos, but if you look at it, it's like entirely brown, and with how colorful Yoshi is, it's really weird that there are multiple entirely brown Yoshi tracks. Okay, Yoshi Falls is not in this game, but it's out there. Yoshi Valley could have been much more interesting if the different paths were more balanced with different kinds of utility, like a path with a single item box, a double item box path, and one with boost panels, one with more coins, one with less coins, one with no coins, and even ones with some sort of combination. Just like the track with 6 different split paths should be one where you have to make interesting decisions, but that's just not really the case. I love the concept of this track, but the execution could have been a lot better. N64 Rainbow Road is a great concept. It's just a 1-lap track split up into 3 sections, and it really fits the theme of Rainbow Road with all the twists and turns, including the wavy road created by the thwomps that you can trick off of. It has one of the best soundtracks in the game. Like, honestly, this might be my favorite soundtrack in all of Mario Kart history. I don't know, maybe not. That's a big statement. I'll think about it. It's probably top 5. But the main downside from a casual perspective is that so much of this track feels exactly the same. I've been playing this game for years, and I still don't know when lap 2 and lap 3 begin. I also don't have the track layout memorized. It's just so easy to see as you go, but none of it is memorable. Anyway, the biggest problem though with this track is that it is just too short. Items that typically have a big impact on the race, like the shock and the blue shell, often don't even show up, making it a real struggle to have any hope of making a comeback. And the worst part is that the beginning section feels very, very luck-based. You could get bumped off or trailed, or you might just not be at the right distance to catch a draft and pass anyone. Then there's almost no coins on the track, so whoever lucked out into first place now just chains the coin item over and over and gets an insane breakaway, while the driving is trivially easy. Okay, you can probably tell now that I'm a competitive player when I'm complaining about how the track works when broken down to a science, so I'm probably taking it too far. But even as a casual player, I definitely remember feeling like getting hit on this track is often unavoidable and pretty much feels like a death sentence. Baby Park is absolutely iconic, and honestly, I'm so glad that it exists. It's not amazing, but it's really funny. This is the only track that has 7 laps, and it's as simple as a racetrack can be. The music is just nuts. I literally don't care that the strategy on this track is to fish for a shock dodge and pray you don't get hit, all the while not knowing what spot everyone else is in. It's fine. That's literally what this track is designed to be. It's hilarious, it's chaotic, and it is not fair at all. I love that this exists in a party game like Mario Kart, and it can be fun. There is a time and place for Baby Park. However, I just think that racing on Baby Park lacks many of the elements that really make it a race or even a show of skill at all, so that's why it's flawed as a Mario Kart track. But it definitely is memorable, it's crazy, and it accomplishes exactly what it is designed for, and there is no other track like Baby Park. Alright, enough with the flaws of each track. Now we're going on to tracks that I think are good. Now, these tracks are not outstanding, but they're definitely good enough as they are, and I always have fun racing on these tracks. These will pretty much set the baseline for how good I think a track should be in Mario Kart. Super Bell Subway is a great concept. I love the moving train cars, and if you take the alternate paths above, you can even go on top of the train cars and they have boost panels on them. You can even ride on them for a while if you'd like, if you're bagging. The track layout feels natural, and we have a station area as well as a subway area. I really enjoy all the Mario game references all over the place, and this sort of detail is also in a lot of other base game tracks, and I really wish we saw more of this in the DLC. Lap 3 is such a crazy experience when the trains are crossing by at the same time, and you really have to be accurate to drive this track well. There are lots of sharp turns and shortcuts and alternate paths. Now, the only reason this track isn't higher for me is because the entire underground section kind of blends together, and I really think they could have used the train concept to give us more different spaces to race in, including potentially an outdoor train track above the ground for part of it. So Super Bell Subway is definitely good, but it's not that amazing. Sherbet Land has great music, a great theme, and several memorable sections. I really appreciate that they made the change so that now underwater sections are drivable on this track, where it used to be out of bounds originally, and these routes are actually useful. The first underwater section isn't great, but it does get you coins, so there is still a use to it, and the second underwater section is actually faster if you fall into the water while charging an orange mini turbo. And I just want to say, it's great that we actually get a bit of water physics helping to make driving faster. So far, none of the tracks I've talked about really benefit from having water physics, and at least there's just like a crumb on this track. However, I do think that the final section as a whole is a bit strange, as it's always faster to stay on the right side, no matter if you take the top or bottom route, and the left side even has a hidden glider cut, but it's not a shortcut, it's a long cut. For such a big open space, they really could have put more coins, items, or boost panels on the left side, but instead the coins are just on the right side, so there's no reason really to go on the left. I also think this huge shortcut at the final item set would have been really fun, but it's really inconsistent. You can easily get an insane amount of air and just fly into the other side. So this is where I think Merry Mountain definitely did it better, where the shortcut is shaped similarly, but it has sticky road so that you don't fly into the air. Finally, a city track that I really like. Vancouver Velocity features frequent changes in scenery from road to bridges to road to a dock to a bridge to road to a hockey stadium to road to the same hockey stadium to road. Okay, it's not doing the best job of it, and it's weird that we enter the hockey stadium twice. But overall, each section feels memorable, and there are plenty of shortcuts too, which is not the case for many other city tracks. A lot of this track is interesting, and the only section I'd say is not great is the super long straight section on lap 3. But unlike other city tracks, when it comes to the turns, it's really not just a road between two walls. I mean, it technically is sometimes, but at least it's designed to look like a bridge instead of whatever this is on Tokyo Blur. And the design really helps to make this track feel more fresh. Just because two tracks functionally have the same section, just having it look like a bridge, putting spin boosters, and making it slightly slanted actually makes this track feel a lot better to drive. I don't need every track to be revolutionary in every single section of it. The least they could do is make it memorable and look nice. I like Singapore Speedway pretty much for the same reasons as Vancouver Velocity. There's nothing revolutionary going on, but at least it's really nice to look at, and each section is actually memorable. The music is also incredible, and I love how it picks up around the time you reach the cannon glider to show how fast-paced and different this track will feel. I never had an issue memorizing the layout on Singapore, as the only time that it really suffers from being an awkward road between two walls, that section is short, and you actually get to see the whole thing at once. So if you crash into a wall, that's just a skill issue. The final glider on this track is also the perfect use of a glider. A lot of the times, gliders are kind of boring because you don't get to do much like drifting on it, but gliders give you a lot of freedom and they allow you to see a lot more of the track. So on Singapore, you really get to take in this amazing view, and you can use the freedom of glider movement to take several different paths. And the fastest way to drive is to take the extra trick boost before getting to the ring boosters. Then you can just fly to the end, or you can descend down for an item, or you can take the path on the left from much earlier. I mean, I've never taken the path on the left, but I can sleep better at night knowing that it's there if I ever really need it. Thanks, Nintendo! Amsterdam Drift is another city track that really doesn't feel like a city track. I'm so glad we actually get to get out of the main city a few times here. Staying in the city for 3 laps just adds confusion and makes you see the same things 3 different times. But Amsterdam has several different sections, including an underwater section where you can pop up to the top, and because of this, the whole track is memorable. However, I will say that the underwater section is a bit dull and awkward to drive, but once you learn what to do and get used to it, it is pretty alright. Lap 1, Lap 2, and Lap 3 all feel very, very different, and that's part of what makes this track so much more memorable than a lot of other city tracks. And I wish this was more practical than it is, but on both 150cc and 200cc, there is a gap jump shortcut that you can do on Lap 1. I'm not an expert on this, so I don't know how practical or useful it is on 200cc, but I'm pretty sure you need 2 mushrooms to take it properly on 150cc. And it's so early in the race, and there's no way you're getting triple mushrooms from the first item set unless you're somehow so far behind that this shortcut is not going to help you catch up anyway. I just wish they put this on lap 2 or 3, and that's all it would take for me to like this track way better. Music Park should have been called Melody Motorway. That's what it's called in the UK, but my game says Music Park, and that's just disappointing. The track concept is great. With the musical instruments everywhere, you can hear the piano keys as you drive over them, you can take a shortcut on this key, the drums act as a bounce pad, and the music notes hit the ground and let you trick off of it. There's just so many fun and creative ideas all over this track. And fun fact, everything on this track is timed to the music. Well, you probably already knew that, but did you know your character's head also moves to the beat? Here, take a look. And if you thought that was just a coincidence, here's what it looks like with the faster music on lap 3. I love the theming of this track and the attention to detail, but I wish it was more colorful, and I wish I could hear more instruments in the music. It's kind of weird that Music Park's soundtrack is mostly electronic, and for it being called Music Park, it's really unfortunate that I don't like the music on this track very much. Riverside Park is your standard GBA track with lots of huge shortcuts, and each one can be done with just 1 mushroom, so you can take these shortcuts in pretty much any position besides first place. The track just feels so satisfying to drive on as you're pretty much always drifting, and the music and lighting really match it well. I would say this track creates a vibe that is not really seen on any other track. I also like the unique enemies that can drop mushrooms. Now, at most levels of play, I think Riverside Park is pretty balanced and fun, but the better I get at this game, the more obvious it is that the final shortcut is just way too big for being a 1 mushroom shortcut. So this is a really strong bagging track with not too much you can do as a frontrunner to gain a lead. The ending cave section is also super chaotic, which means if you don't have an invincibility item for this section, you're really rolling the dice. However, at most levels, this track is balanced and dynamic and tends to have super exciting endings. Ninja Hideaway is a very special track. I've definitely heard people call this one a custom track. There are a lot of things on Ninja Hideaway that just don't really work for me. There's this horrible respawn if you fall off the glider in the shortcut, where it feels like they just forgot to program a respawn location, and Lakitu figures it out on the spot, while being like, "Figuring this out is not my job!" There are also a ton of alternate paths, which is cool in concept, but most of them are useless. There's also this upward wind that you should definitely avoid at all costs because it's not only slow, it also puts you on the top path, which is slower, assuming you can even aim that way. But honestly, most of these flaws don't matter too much, because once you learn how to play Ninja Hideaway, there are a lot of things that make it really special. You thought I meant this track was special in a bad way. No, it's in a good way as well. The Piranha Plant wooden board shortcut is one of the coolest shortcuts in the game. There is no other shortcut that you can take shroomless by precisely bumping a wall to hit an obstacle so that you don't spin out, or use pretty much any item to get through it, and other people can break the board for you. It's just so satisfying to do every time, but not as satisfying as the ending gap jump shortcut on 200cc. So much of this track is genuinely challenging, but very rewarding and unique at the same time. This has definitely been one of my favorite tracks to time trial on both 150 and 200cc. Thwomp Ruins is a decent track to have in the game as a challenging track with obstacles that also has so many alternate paths. However, as you get better at Mario Kart, you realize that there is pretty much only one path through the track that's worth taking, including the beginning shortcut, which you should always take even without a mushroom. And for being called Thwomp Ruins, on the entire track, you are never in danger of being hit by a thwomp. This track is pretty much a lesson that you should always just be as straight as possible, because the wide paths are usually not good, which is actually an important lesson to learn in Mario Kart. I remember this track feeling very challenging the first few times that I played on it, but the better I got at this game, the more I realized I just wasn't taking the right paths, and the correct paths are just not the most interesting paths. So driving on Thwomp Ruins in the end is still fun, it's just not as interesting as I think it could be. In my opinion, there should be more tracks like Bone Dry Dunes. This is one of the few tracks in the game that really feels like it was designed to be a big challenge. Even now, I still often make mistakes and struggle to take optimal lines. Massive skill issue on my part, honestly. For me, the highlight of this track is the sandy and bumpy section in the middle. With how slippery the road is and how you constantly get airtime, and also that you're probably going to be in a mini turbo boost as you take a lot of this section, sometimes you actually need to brake drift, even on 150cc. And on 200cc, this section is just a nightmare, but it's so satisfying when you can nail the drifting. And unlike Piranha Plant Slide, it doesn't feel janky. It really feels like this is the challenge that the track presents to you. And so for me, that's what makes it fun and rewarding, even though, yeah, it is just very strange to take this section. Another challenging section is landing from the glider, as you suddenly have a very sharp turn on slippery road. I feel like if the whole track was more challenging like this, I'd probably like it a lot more, because a lot of this track is just not as interesting as these two sections. But I can also see why a lot of players actually don't like Bone Dry Dunes for the reason that I like it, and I get it. It's a weird track, but I like it. Los Angeles Laps starts off really great. We go from the city straight to the beach. There are shortcuts, different paths, and even a huge shortcut. And technically, you can even take this shortcut shroomless using the half pipe. I've done it a few times, but it feels really inconsistent for some reason. Maybe I'm missing something, but I wish it was a little bit easier. Okay, and then we return to the city. Lap 1 is really, really good. But then lap 2 and lap 3 is where it starts to fall apart. You see, from here, it pretty much just becomes a standard city track where you're driving on a road with awkward turns between two walls, and then you run into this thing? Why is that a double boost panel? Were they not able to find a better texture? Madrid Drive has the exact same thing but with one boost panel. Rosalina's Ice World has long boost panels. It just does not have to be that ugly. Okay, and then we spend half a lap going into and back out of an oil rig area. And like, that's fine, I guess, but it's weird how much time this takes up when this is not what anyone thinks about when they think about Los Angeles. Where are the influencer Yoshis and Instagram model Toads? Where's the gridlocked traffic that we drive in between while none of the cars are moving? Overall, this track has its ups and downs. Lap 1 is amazing, but the rest of the track just isn't that interesting. Paris Promenade is a vibe perfected. The music, the color palette, and design of the track match really well to create a relaxed and laid-back feel. In terms of the layout, you might expect that this is the type of track I would dislike, but this is the one track where I will accept that we have really long drifts that you just hold, because it actually feels right to hold a drift and wait, because this is just a promenade through Paris. That's how it's supposed to feel. Okay, and I've said the word promenade twice now, I guess 3 times now, and I know I'm going to get comments of people telling me that I'm pronouncing this word wrong. It happens every single time I even mention this track. It is so funny, because I'm not pronouncing it wrong. It's promenade. This is an English word pronounced promenade. People telling me it's wrong are telling me, oh, but that's a French word and it's pronounced promenade. No, it's not. The R sound is completely different in French. And even then, like, why don't you just correct me on my pronunciation of Paris? Paris is way more wrong compared to my pronunciation of promenade. Paris Promenade is 2 English words that I'm pronouncing correctly in English. If you want me to pronounce it in French, I'm not going to do that. I don't speak French. Like, how would you like it if I went to a bakery where we all speak English, and instead of ordering a croissant like a normal person, I said, hey, can I get a croissant? Like, that's weird, right? Why did I just switch languages? Anyway, if you're someone who wants to die on the hill that I'm not pronouncing promenade correctly, then you might want to take a look at English, because English is a mashup of so many different languages, and I really hope you're pronouncing everything right from where every single word came from. Okay, anyway, rant over. Let's get back to
Paris Promenade.
Promenade parisienne.
I love the split path section where you can either get boost panels and items, or you can take a faster path on the left. However, I don't like that the pipe section looks like off-road, which really tricked me at the start. Paris Promenade is pretty much designed perfectly for what it wants to be, but what it wants to be is not that interesting. I respect it, I think it's designed very well, but it doesn't get to rank too highly for me. Wario's Gold Mine is a pretty standard track. I think I would have liked it a lot more if the mine carts were still hazards like they were in Mario Kart Wii. The minecarts made this section genuinely very dangerous, but instead now they just give you a tiny little speed boost, which is mostly useless, so you kind of just ignore the minecarts. The rest of the track is pretty decent though. It's super satisfying to trick off the corner ramps, and the turns in general I would say are a little wide and awkward, but charging up the proper mini turbos here is extra risky and fun because of it, as you could fall off if you do it incorrectly. And I like that the 2 dips in the road really make things chaotic, as you're blind to the items that may be placed there. If I could make a change though, I would make the first item set have a double item box, and that incentivizes the frontrunners to drop bananas and throw shells back strategically. Another part of the track that is really underrated is just how real it all looks. You can see a lot in the distance, and this actually feels like a real place that could exist outside of Mario Kart. It's tracks like these that really make me appreciate the more realistic art style of the base game tracks. SNES Rainbow Road has definitely grown on me over the years. I remember thinking it was just kind of boring since it's pretty much just a flat track with not too much going on, which is unlike all the other Rainbow Roads. But what it does have going on is actually really fun. The music is pretty good once it gets going, and even just the layout. It's completely flat, but it has so many sharp turns, and it's really great for charging up mini turbos, especially on 200cc, where the mini turbos actually make it risky as you could fall off on the turns. The gap jump shortcut is always satisfying to pull off, especially since it's actually difficult to line up such a sharp turn to make the jump. I don't usually care too much for thwomps as enemies, but they are used perfectly here. When they slam into the ground, we get wavy road to trick on, and there is very little room to maneuver around them, so you really have to make a choice about which way to go and be accurate, especially if somebody else is near. Of course, I do think that they could have designed this track to have more interesting parts, but they're doing a really good job for what they're working with. Snowland is such a mixed bag for me. It's really fun, yet it is so stupid. And overall, for me, that just averages out to being good, but not great. Now, we have to talk about the huge shortcut at the start. It's the biggest one mushroom shortcut in the game, and it saves 3.5 seconds, which is just way too much. Honestly, I think this shortcut was very poorly designed. I mean, it's fun when this stuff exists, like all the jank you see in Mario Kart Wii. It is fun. I like this shortcut, but it just doesn't feel quite right. I remember trying to learn this one for the first time, and there really is no indication of where the out of bounds zone is. They could have put a cliff or a tree or something, but nope. Saving 3.5 seconds is okay, but saving 4 seconds is illegal. You're going all the way back here, buddy. And okay, this shortcut is fun once you get the hang of it, but that's kind of it for the track. The rest of the track is really just not that interesting, and I find myself spending the entire race thinking about how I'm gonna make sure I can take this shortcut on the next lap. This is your classic case of bagging being way more fun and effective than front running. At least the races here tend to be really crazy, and I've had a lot of memorable moments. It's also where I successfully dodged a blue shell with a ground mushroom, and then the blue shell got revenge on me on lap 3. This is the only time I've ever seen it take that shortcut. It usually goes around. It was out to get me. Okay, I will admit, for the longest time, I did not like Dolphin Shoals at all. And if you don't like it, I don't blame you. Most people probably don't like this track. But Dolphin Shoals is secretly fun and difficult. But it's just boring when you don't actually know how to do any of those things. So you can get low tricks on the ramps at the start. There are 3 decent paths to take in the cave, with the right path being the fastest, and you can also skip the items afterwards for a little shortcut. On the eel, you have to hit a whole bunch of tricks, which is very difficult by just pressing R, so it's much easier if you shake your controller to trick. Then on the final glider, there's a glider shortcut that you can only take if you have motion controls or smart steering enabled. And honestly, all of this is really fun. Especially after learning the motion glider shortcut, the track just feels way better to play. However, there's something really dumb about this all. Dolphin Shoals is the most unfair track in the game. And what I mean by that is, the optimal way to play this track online is to use a pro controller, shake your controller on the eel, pause and quickly turn on motion controls, then do the motion glider, then pause to turn motion controls off again. Unless you're playing against the bots, don't do this offline because the game just pauses for everybody, and you cannot do this with lots of other controllers, including my baby, the GameCube controller. Well, I can do the motion glider. In fact, I can more easily do the motion glider than the Pro Controller, but I cannot shake trick on the eel. And it's not a timing issue, the mechanics of tricking are literally different between controllers. I still like the track despite the controller disparity, but in principle, this is really stupid. So thanks, Nintendo. This is such a Nintendo thing to have in a game and not get fixed after 8 years. But oh well, I hope the next game doesn't favor particular controllers. Just kidding, it will, and the GameCube controller will reign supreme. Toad Circuit was definitely very jarring to see as one of the first DLC tracks, and people loved to make fun of it for how the textures look compared to the base game tracks. And yeah, if you were just looking at Wario's Gold Mine and then suddenly you see Toad Circuit, these don't look like they're from the same game. Now, there's nothing wrong with a more cartoonish art style, it's just that it doesn't fit in this game. But that was when the DLC first came out. Now, half the tracks look like this, so get over it, it does belong in this game. Toad Circuit has one of my favorite soundtracks, and I feel like it really captures the vibe of Mario Kart. It's a very shortcut-focused track, especially with the huge final shortcut, which is actually very difficult to do well with just one mushroom. This is mostly a bagging track, but front running can work as well as it's a short track. This is definitely a track that I liked more and more as I got better at the game, since it really tests your item management, shortcut skills, and snaking ability, which is when you drift back and forth to get mini turbos. I do feel like this track is relatively rewarding for skill, both for front running and for bagging, but I don't think it does it that well for either of them, and there is definitely quite a luck-based element because it is short and you never know how many blue shells and shocks could show up. Maybe there will be none and a comeback is impossible. So having to commit to a strategy can be really weird and unrewarding on this track sometimes. But this track is always very fun, and I've had some of my best and worst moments happen right at the end of Toad's Circuit. Next up, we have the tracks that are very good. These are tracks that I feel offer something interesting, but they don't have that special sauce that makes them great. I really like these tracks, but they definitely have room to improve. Twisted Mansion is very good. I used to just feel alright about this one, but the more I play it, the more I can appreciate what it has that other tracks don't have. There are two sections on this track with a split path where both paths are nearly the same speed. And honestly, I think Mario Kart needs way more of this. When both paths are the same speed, the path I take actually depends on where the other racers are. If I want to hit someone, I need to take the same path. But if I want to dodge, I need to take the other path. Plenty of tracks have alternate paths, but usually they're just not worth taking because they're too slow. And with 24 players coming to Mario Kart 9, I really hope that the tracks are designed with more split paths as well, maybe longer split paths too, so I don't have to face the wrath of 23 other players at once. I already cannot handle 11 other players. As for the rest of the track, the more I play it, the more the turns feel perfectly suited for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe drifting, and getting each mini turbo feels very satisfying. The only part I really don't enjoy on this track is the basement underwater section. Like, why is it flooded, and why is the whole thing just walls? But I do like the creepy mansion theme. The supernatural vibe goes perfectly with this disappearing banana peel. No! Cloudtop Cruise has amazing music, it looks great, and each section is very different and memorable. And just like Twisted Mansion, there is a short split path that is about equally fast no matter which way you go, and you can seriously make up some spots just by choosing the path that is safer. I especially love the electronic remix of the soundtrack when you get to the boost panel section. This section is honestly not that interesting, but you still have the choice between coins and boost panels, and you have to dodge the lightning strikes. And then, of course, the final shortcut. I always failed this as a beginner because I thought it was a bounce pad and you had to trick right away, so I would just fall off. But it's really fun to do, it's not too hard, and it's also a risk if you get bumped or hit during this shortcut. You could definitely fall all the way back from first to last, so be careful out there, and don't be like Short Dog. That's actually so embarrassing. I'm so sorry I've shown this so many times. I'm not that sorry. Daisy Circuit, for the most part, feels relatively basic, but something about the textures, the music, and the feel of the track just fit together really well. The main shortcut has a wooden board that makes it function similarly to Ninja Hideaway, but since it's off-road on the inside, it's unfortunately not always worth taking unless you have a mushroom. But I really enjoy charging a purple mini turbo into the shortcut and releasing it off the glider. The ending section is also fun as there are multiple paths you can take here depending on if you need coins or items. Then with how it's slightly faster to take the sidewalk, I love how there's just enough to keep every section of this track engaging. And I'm glad we don't have that thing from Mario Kart Wii where the cones can randomly slow you down. Now that was stupid. Sydney Sprint is a pretty good track. It has one of the best soundtracks in the game, and unlike a lot of city tracks, the layout is relatively easy to remember. Lap 1 is super fun because of how you can get draft boosts and try to snipe other players to try and take first or second, because the top two spots get to take all the coins at the start. This is a dynamic that you don't really see on most tracks, and if you're in the back, you can strategize to wait for the coins to respawn and then grab them afterwards uncontested. And then you can make your comeback on lap 2, because lap 2 alone has 6 shortcuts. This makes for a very interesting strategy compared to other tracks. I can't think of a single other track that's like this. So comebacks are very possible, but you're much better off making your comeback early, and you still have to fight to keep your position at the top for a whole lap. It's not like other shortcut heavy tracks where you can just stay safe and come back right at the end, because making a comeback on Sydney has to be timed well, and it's still a risk. My only downside for this track is that pretty much all of lap 3 is not that interesting. It just becomes City Track, and then Excitebike Arena, and then the end of Tokyo Blur again. It's just like a kind of wide turn with 2 walls on the side. It's not that interesting here, but lap 1 and 2 really make up for it, and honestly, if lap 3 was better, then I could put Sydney way higher on this list, because it really offers something unique that we don't see on other tracks. Bowser's Castle delivers very well on its theme, and it has a distinct look and feel. And I like that you actually have to look forward on multiple sections of this track, first to see where the fire pillar and wrecking ball are, because if you don't look early at the turn before, then you're going to run into it. And then later in the track, you have to do this again to see which way Bowser is going to punch. Although this is not that important because you can kind of just drive around his hand, but you will miss the boost panel. Now, both paths in this section are about equally fast, and depending on the cycle, you can even take a little gap jump shortcut on the left side. This is especially cool on 200cc, plus you can even take a little gap jump on the right side as well. I can't really explain why I don't like this track more, because it feels like it's checking a lot of boxes. I think it is very good, obviously, but there are so many great tracks in the game that I just don't see it going any higher. I don't feel like it has anything that makes this track very special. It's just a very solid track. Daisy Cruiser has a unique theme and creates a very relaxing feel. When you first play this track, you might feel like it's a little bit too simple, but as you get better at the game, the driving starts to become very technical, and it's super satisfying to get all the mini turbos just right. There really is just barely enough room on the track to squeeze out all the optimal mini turbos, and it is a very fun track to front run because of that. And while the track appears straightforward, there are actually quite a few alternate paths that have uses. You can go around the swimming pool for extra coins, you can take an underwater path for 3 item boxes instead of just the 1 item that you would get on the top path, and at the split path after the finish line, it's actually not much slower to take the left path instead to stay away from other players, and you won't have to fight for item boxes. Just make sure you don't hit yourself with a green shell. Toad Harbor is a decently fun track at all levels of play. The music here is extremely underrated, and there are alternate paths all over the place. Now, not all of them are useful, but I especially enjoy all the paths that you can take at the beginning section, since there's actually a reason to take all of them. Whether it's for coins, or for item boxes, or for going faster, all of these paths until the shortcut through the buildings are all useful. But my favorite part about Toad Harbor is definitely the tram bounce, which is one of the most difficult techniques in the game, and it pretty much only works if you're on a fast pace on lap 1. But it gives you a huge lead if you can pull it off, and it feels amazing. It's basically a shortcut, but it's way cooler than a shortcut. And this track is also a really fun challenge on 200cc, especially with the thin path shortcut being a lot more difficult. And it's possible to take the ending shortcut without a mushroom. The city track that feels the least like a city track is definitely Athens Dash, and that is a compliment. This track looks completely different from all the other city tracks, and it is beautiful. Just don't look too closely or you'll see polygons. But technically, you can say that about every track. The polygons are just different sized. Athens Dash has so many opportunities to do tricks and mini turbo tricks, making it fun for beginners and experts. Some of the grass shortcuts can be done without a mushroom, and there are actually several big shortcuts on the track, which cannot be said for most city tracks. And despite being mostly brown, each section is actually very memorable and unique because of the layout and all the things that you pass by. And because everything feels different from each other, it feels very natural to memorize the track layout. And honestly, that is what city tracks should be. You should get to see a lot of memorable things, right? That's the whole point of adapting real life cities, and it shouldn't just be boring the whole time. Overall, this is a very good track, and it does not suffer from any of the classic city track issues. It even has this insane shortcut on 200cc. I love when this stuff is possible, even though it's not that practical in a real race. But it just goes to show that this track has a lot of interesting stuff going on and has a lot of creativity that this stuff is even possible. I mean, on most city tracks, you're just on a road between two walls with no elevation change, and so obviously none of this crazy stuff is possible. Rome Avanti has a layout that can be a bit difficult to memorize, but that's about the only real downside to this track. And in my opinion, lap 1 of Rome is honestly one of the best laps in the whole game. I find it so fun to charge up mini turbos up the ramps and then fly out of the building with an orange mini turbo charged onto the ground, take a shortcut and try not to hit the little corner, and then there are 2 more shortcuts at the end of the lap, and then you can even mini turbo trick on the sewer. But then we get to lap 2, and lap 2 is not nearly as interesting. I really remember struggling to memorize the layout for a lot of this because everywhere it kind of looks the same, but then lap 3 gets pretty good again. But I don't know what's the deal with this section right after the glider, and it really feels like you should be able to land on this thing with the glider and take a shortcut, but the way it is right now, it's just like a big turn that like I don't even know what we're passing by right now. But anyway, the end of lap 3 is just the end of lap 1 again, and that's why it's any good. And I like that the ending shortcuts are not so big as to be broken, but they definitely cause a lot of chaos and exciting endings. I could definitely rank Rome Avanti much higher if the rest of the track played as well as lap 1, but honestly, lap 2 and lap 3 are just kind of okay. I would also rank it higher if they added more pizza. That's the only food they eat in Italy, so there should be way more pizza signs around here. Very unrealistic. Sunset Wilds is a really fun track. I remember this track got a lot of criticism when it first came out because the sun does not set anymore. But since I have no nostalgia for the original, I find myself unable to care. There is so much off-road on this track, and all of the shortcuts are really fun to do. I'm also glad that the shortcuts are mainly in the first half of the track, because otherwise bagging here would be way more broken than it already is. You can also do 2 of the shortcuts without a mushroom, and pulling these off perfectly is actually incredibly difficult and satisfying. Now, front running is not that good on this track, so you won't be doing these shortcuts that often, but at least front running is really fun on this track. There is no other track that has quite the same textures and feel, so I'm really happy that we have Sunset Wilds in the game. Mario Kart Stadium is the first track in the game, and I think it does an amazing job of showcasing all the mechanics in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. But before we get to that, let's just talk about the music. This music is so iconic, it just feels like the music of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It's really, really good. Like, I don't think it's doing anything revolutionary in the music, but it just is so memorable and it just feels so right for the first track in the game. Now, on this track, there are 2 very sharp turns where you can easily get a purple mini turbo. There are boost panels on the side. There are plenty of off-road shortcuts. There's anti-gravity, a glider, and trick ramps. This is great design for the first track in a game because pretty much everything is here for you to learn. But it's not just a beginner track. There is so much advanced tech as well, and that's part of what makes this track a lot better. And honestly, that's something that really shocked me when I first saw this track played at a high level. Nearly every shortcut on this track can be done without a mushroom, including the final shortcut, which you can take by gliding over it. And this shortcut gets pretty intense. There are levels to it. Like, if you just hold back and try to glide over the shortcut, it's doable, but it's actually very slow. If you release a purple mini turbo into the glider, that really helps you clear it, and this is a very fast way to do it, although it's a bit tough to get the purple mini turbo to activate at just the right time. But if you have at least one mushroom and have motion controls turned on, then you can just commit absolute robberies at the end of the race. Like, it is crazy how big this shortcut can be. You're just gliding, but gliding diagonally is broken because the game doesn't cap your speed. It's such a crazy, like, oversight that happens in so many video games, and it's here too, and it's just insane. I love this shortcut. It is so fun, and no, I'm not just biased because I have the GameCube controller and I can do motion controls at all times. Now, however, there is a downside to this because obviously this is right at the end of the track, and so at a high level, this is more of a bagging track, but it's not too intense. The shortcuts are kind of balanced enough that you can still win by front running. It's just not the better strategy. And at most levels of play, this track is incredibly balanced and dynamic. Front running works, but comebacks are always possible, which makes for very exciting and unpredictable races.
So how come both of you voted for this track?
I like this track.
Yeah, I mean, there you go.
Mario Circuit uses a really cool idea thanks to anti-gravity. This track is a Mobius strip, which means that even though you never leave the track to go to the other side, the way that it works with the geometry is that you do end up driving on both sides of the track, and you can even see the upside down track if you look carefully. In theory, this is such a fun idea, but in practice, the track being a Mobius strip doesn't really add anything. In fact, it just makes the layout have a bunch of wide turns. I feel like they only made this track so they could put something unique on the poster to showcase the anti-gravity dynamic. And also, this track is in the shape of an 8. That's pretty cool. However, driving this track does have some complexity. If you just drift, the Piranha plant will get you, but instead you can slightly swerve around it, or if you're behind someone, it will try to bite them first and ignore you. Or you can also mini turbo to escape its bite. This simple mechanic leads to surprisingly fun decisions on what would otherwise be a relatively boring section. Another neat thing about this track is the 2 huge shortcuts. They're supposed to be taken with 2 mushrooms, but you actually can do it with just 1 mushroom and some very precisely timed hops. And if that's too difficult, you can also just plan to cut off a smaller amount of the shortcut with 1 mushroom. And these shortcuts look big enough to make it a bagging track, but surprisingly, this track is a little bit more balanced than you think. It is a bagging track, but not that much of a bagging track. Front running does work a lot of the time, and front running this is more fun than you might expect. And fun fact, the music on this track is a remix of Mario Kart Stadium. Just like the Mobius strip, I like that idea, but I think the sound they used is a bit weird, and I do prefer the original Mario Kart Stadium music. Ice Outpost looks beautiful. The soundtrack is really good, and the gameplay is really fun. The whole track is just you driving on the yellow or green path, which sounds pretty boring in theory, but they tend to split off into paths that are about equally fast, and you can still choose to switch paths again after making your choice because it keeps changing elevation. With how thin the road is, and with walls, it's really easy to get hit by an item on this track. So choosing the correct path to avoid items and avoid other players is crucial to being good at this track. And that's a skill that you just don't get tested on that much in this game. There's also a really fun but risky shortcut that skips the double item box and leads into an optional second part of the shortcut that is even more difficult to get just right. Part of what makes these shortcuts so difficult is not only that you're driving on slippery road with low traction, but also that you spend a lot of your time in the air, and you cannot change your trajectory in midair. So sometimes the shortcut looks easy, but just know that if you flew off in the wrong direction, you're just gonna keep going in the wrong direction until you fall off. And then near the end, I love this. The optimal line is to switch from the yellow path back to the green path. and I just love path switches. It's just a really different sort of way of taking a shortcut, but it's also sort of optional because depending on who's near you, you may just want to take one of these paths. And there's just something that feels so smart about them. And even the final shortcut has its own complexity. If you take a safe and direct line in, you'll actually go so fast that you miss the second trick ramp, and that's slower. But if you play it riskier and take a precise turn in, you can get 2 tricks. Love it. Now, the reason I don't rank this track higher is because I feel like it is a little bit too easy to get hit, and it doesn't always feel like there was anything you can do about that. So even though you can do path switches to get away, sometimes you can't really, and then there's actually very little comeback potential on this track because all of the shortcuts do not take a mushroom. And plus, trying to get through the pack back up to the front, you're probably just gonna get hit again. But there's nothing wrong with having tracks that really reward front running. Tick-Tock Clock is one of the most special tracks in the game. It has a unique clock theme, and not only does it look great with very fitting music to match, the gameplay on this track perfectly delivers on the clock concept. The entire track is full of moving parts that operate on a cycle, and it's one of the only tracks where you actually have to constantly look forward and stay focused on the track elements to see where they are. It takes a lot of quick planning to dodge hazards or successfully trick on all of the gears, and the track even ends off with a shortcut that can only be done if the clock hands are in the right position, and this is one of the most difficult and satisfying shortcuts in the game. There are just not many tracks where you actually have to look forward and adapt your driving depending on what's going on the track, so Tick-Tock Clock is very special in that way. Now, I have to be honest and say that this isn't exactly my favorite kind of track to play, as I find more fun in tracks that reward you for stuff like precise drifting and decision making, but even if you don't like Tick-Tock Clock for whatever reason, you have to admit that it perfectly executes the concept that it is going for. Maple Treeway is such a fan favorite track, and I really wish that I liked it more. It's beautiful, it's relaxing, it just has a great theme with each section being memorable, and the wigglers are adorable as always. Now, I'm going to explain why I have Maple Treeway relatively low, but first let me explain why I actually liked it before. Maple Treeway was one of my favorite tracks in Mario Kart Wii, and I liked it for specific reasons, and those reasons are kind of just all gone in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So first of all, there is the challenge and the advanced techniques. In Mario Kart Wii, you could kind of take the beginning shortcut Shroomless, and I'm pretty sure it was not faster, but you get a better item out of it because of how the game reads your position while in the shortcut. In Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it's just so slow that you should never do that. In Mario Kart Wii, there are 2 sharp turns in the tree section that were very difficult, and you could take a really sharp turn, but then you risk falling off. So there was some level of risk and reward and skill going on here. In Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the track is designed differently and it's pretty basic. Another thing was the leaf piles. Hitting a leaf pile had a chance for a mushroom to pop out, and some leaf piles even had a very small chance to give you a star. In Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the leaf piles cannot give you a star, but they can still give you a mushroom. However, because of the direction and distance that the mushrooms pop out from, it is often impossible to react fast enough to grab the mushroom, so you often actually want to avoid the leaf piles to ensure that nobody behind you gets to have a mushroom boost. There were just so many things that made Maple Treeway special in Mario Kart Wii, and those things were all the things that I liked about the track, and now all of those are gone. So I'm not ranking this low because it's worse than its Mario Kart Wii version. I don't do that around here. I'm just comparing the track to all the other tracks in this game. But I just want to explain to you why I feel like Maple Treeway, despite being such a fan favorite track, I really don't think the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe version works nearly as well. And with all that being said, obviously Maple Treeway is not a bad track. There are still many good things about it. It looks great. I love the wiggler, I love the music, I love the vibes, the trees look amazing. It looks really good. It feels really nice to look at. It's just there's not much going on here. And for one of the longest tracks in the game, after playing Maple Treeway a lot in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, I just feel like I'm a little bit more bored by this track than I should be. And it's really unfortunate that I remember a version that I liked a lot better, but now a lot of what I liked is missing. So I like parts about Maple Treeway, but for how it plays, it really just feels like a very standard track now. If you watch a lot of my videos, especially competitive videos, you'll know that Rosalina's Ice World is one of my favorite tracks to pick as of recent, and my win rate on this track is really high. However, I try not to be biased in that way. Just because I win a lot on a track, that does not make it a better track. Rosalina's Ice World is a special case. I don't think this track is super amazing, I just like to pick it for two reasons. The first reason is that Rosalina's Ice World is one of the best front-running tracks in the game, so if I won the previous race, I will pick this track to start in first and get a huge advantage. That's actually why I have a high win rate on this track. It's because almost nobody in competitive likes to pick this track except me, and I only pick it after I win. And that leads into the second reason. It's kind of a sleeper pick for frontrunning because it's a very technical track and also one of the newer tracks, so I can catch other people lacking the skills to compete with me here. So even if somebody else manages to get into first, I can sometimes just outline them and I get to be in first. So essentially, I picked this track because it's unfair and nobody else likes it, so I get a free win. And of course, there are tracks that are technically better for frontrunning if we think about like Moonview Highway or Water Park, but it's hard to be much better than everybody else on those tracks since they are much easier to drive. So anyway, that's why Rosalina's Ice World is not a top tier track. You might think I like it so much, but I pick it specifically so I can have an uninteresting race, but uninteresting in the way that I get to stay in first the whole time. However, it still is a very good track. The music is definitely one of my favorite in the whole game. It gives a very calm feel, which I think perfectly matches the theme of this track. There's also a lot of tech you can do, and it's extremely precise to get all the mini turbos just right. For example, on lap 2 and 3, you can get a mini turbo trick to land on the top path, then drift down into the bottom path. It's like a free orange mini turbo that allows you to then get 2 trick boosts. And if you're not as practiced, you can instead use the half pipe boost to reach the top path. It's also amazing that you can do this gap jump shortcut at the start using 2 mushrooms and smart steering. When this track first came out, this shortcut is what everyone was wondering, is that possible? And I'm so glad it's possible because later in the DLC, Nintendo definitely made Lac 2 less strict when picking you up. Now, this shortcut is about the same speed as just using 2 mushrooms on the ground. However, there's a reason to do this shortcut, and that's to go faster without actually being on the ground, because being on the ground in this section is so dangerous. This is the dumbest section of the track, which is also part of why I pick it, because first place has such a huge advantage as you never have to deal with passing somebody on this part of the path. You never have to deal with getting bumped either. This section is so thin, and it's basically impossible to dodge anything, making comebacks very difficult unless you get lucky or have an invincibility item for this section. This was actually part of why I didn't like this track at first, but then I realized, oh, hey, that means first place gets a huge advantage. Let's pick it against competitive players. So Rosalina's Ice World is very fun and very difficult and satisfying to front run, but that's about it. I can't say that it's very balanced and fun for everyone else. Our last track in the very good tier is Shroom Ridge. Shroom Ridge is pretty much your standard, very good example of a Mario Kart track. I mean, it does a really good job of everything. The music is amazing, and it just feels like you're going on a fun Mario Kart adventure. The track is very bright and colorful, it has lots of twists and turns, plenty of hazards, a huge grass shortcut, and then a gap jump shortcut at the very end. This track feels super satisfying to drive, and it's a nice mix of peaceful driving and decision making. I find myself usually not liking the tracks with cars on them, but I think the cars work really well on this track because there are not too many of them, but they still present a challenge. Because of all the twists and turns, it's really fun to take a faster line by going between the car and the wall, but you have to watch out for bumps, and sometimes it's actually not possible, so you have to take a wider turn around some of the sharpest turns. The ending section is also great, as you'll be getting several mini turbos as you dodge the cars, which is a real challenge even for experienced players. Plus, if you're about to get hit by an item at any point on the track, you can use the car to mitigate damage. The gap jump shortcut is also interesting, as you cannot change your direction in midair, so you have to preemptively aim away from the cars or be quick to correct your line afterwards. Shroom Ridge is very fun to front run, but also the two shortcuts give you a very real chance to make a comeback if you use your items intelligently. While there is nothing that's quite outstanding on this track, I would say there's really nothing bad to say about Shroom Ridge, and that's why it's our final track in the very good tier. Alright, next up we have the tracks that are better than very good. They are great. These are tracks that are always fun or provide some sort of unique experience that is not found on many tracks. I don't think these tracks are perfect by any means, but that doesn't matter when pretty much everything else about the track is so good. And starting here is where we're probably going to see many people's favorite tracks. Waluigi Pinball has one of the best soundtracks in the game. Although it is the same as Wario Stadium, I don't mind it as they did originally share music anyway, and the music is just so good. Honestly, I associate this soundtrack more with Waluigi Pinball than with Wario Stadium. Like when the track first came out, I didn't even realize they just reused music because it sounds so good here. The pinball theme is creative and works really well, as it just makes the track so interesting to look at and to drive. Now, you could say that most of the green section is a bit dull in terms of aesthetics, but honestly, who's looking? I'm trying to get this perfect mini turbo while not hitting the wall and staying ahead of the pinball. All these sharp turns are really fun, as they are actually quite a challenge even on 150cc, not to mention 200cc where you need some heavy brake drifting just to survive. And I also love a lot of the little decisions you need to make on the track. The pinball goes almost as fast as you, so you really have to make a decision on if you want to try and get ahead of it or slow down and play it safe. And putting a double item box at the far end of the sharpest turn in the entire game is just diabolical. You lose so much time going for this that going for a single item box is basically a shortcut. The final section, which is beautiful by the way, is also very interactive. The pinballs move fast and you need to predict ahead of time where they will be so you can dodge them. You can also choose to take the side paths, which is slower, but you do get 5 coins out of it. Every turn on this track is just so satisfying to take, and you're pretty much always getting orange and purple mini turbos on every single turn. Now, the only thing I don't like so much about Waluigi Pinball is the lack of comeback potential. Obviously, I like that front running is powerful because you're constantly in a mini turbo boost, but playing from the back can feel very helpless. There are no shortcuts, and your speed items often don't stack with mini turbo boosts anyway, so they don't feel quite as good to use. But overall, Waluigi Pinball is a great track. Shy Guy Falls is a track that I only kind of like starting out, but over time I started to like it more and more. And honestly, a lot of the beginning section is actually just not that special. But the fun starts after the boost panel section, and I didn't realize it until I got a lot better at the game, but the track really starts to test you from this point. The item that you get here is extremely important, as you are not going to get another item until the shortcut. And since everyone just got their item, you need to be very skilled to dodge all the chaos that happens here. Then on the glider, you have a choice between top or bottom path. It's not a huge difference in speed, but you do want to avoid running into other players as the paths are narrow. Then we have the shortcut. And oh boy, this shortcut is fun! You can take this shortcut in so many different ways. There are 3 ways you can take it shroomless, each one with a different balance of risk and reward. And if you do have a mushroom, it's technically faster to save it for the next shortcut coming up afterwards, since that is one that you cannot do shroomless. However, if you choose to take the shortcut shroomless, you could always get bumped or hit by other faster players, so maybe you should use your mushroom on the first shortcut. It really depends on who and what is around you. Or if you're way in the back, maybe it's worth grabbing the double item box instead and losing a bunch of time for it. And even if you have 2 mushrooms so you can take both shortcuts, taking both shortcuts is actually not that easy. In my opinion, this is one of the best designed shortcuts in the game, as there are so many ways to do it, and if you want to be the best at this track, you really have to make this decision quickly and know how to do most versions of the ending. There's so many decisions to be made here, and the shortcut is so important. In fact, it starts to become important at the very first item set, because if you're near the front, you're not guaranteed a mushroom at the second item set, so you might want to try and get it at the first item set. Look, Shy Guy Falls is not all great, but I just think the ending is outstanding and just so fun, and that's why I think it's a great track. Now, before we begin, I want you to listen to the music on Neo Bowser City. The music on this track is actually a remix or mashup of several other tracks. If you'd like, look away from the video and see if you can tell what they are, because I'm going to write on screen what each section is. And here it is again with the original music. It's so funny to think that in the futuristic Neo Bowser City, they've run out of music, and all they have is the music that's already been made before, and they're just remixing it. One of the tracks that I really liked as a new player was Neo Bowser City. The slippery road and consecutive sharp turns make this track very difficult to drive well. Even if you can just drive it all right, you'd be surprised how much time you could be saving if you took each turn perfectly. And because you're boosting into these turns on slippery road, you really have to commit to your lines, and you cannot really correct a bad line into a good one. So even though there are not many shortcuts, this track is very technical and rewards being skilled. Now, as I started improving at the game, I started to feel a bit hopeless on this track whenever I was in the back, because passing other players is always very risky, as it's such a thin path you have to share. But I do think having the whole track be like this maybe was the point all along. A lot of the time, you'll be in a situation where on any other track, you can overtake another racer. But on Neo Bowser City, sometimes you just have to resist that urge and hold your position because the risk is not worth it. This is where the decision making from moment to moment is interesting on this track. I don't hate this about this track because the truth is that comebacks are still very possible. If you can pull off some skillful item dodges or use an invincibility item at a smart time, you can make up a ton of spots as everybody else falls. Now, that doesn't mean you can come back into first, because you would need everyone to get hit for that to happen. When it does happen, it's crazy. And I don't think every track should make it so easy to come back into first anyway, so this is great. And also, this is arguably my worst track in the game, not because I'm that bad at it, but because every time I play here, several awful things happen to me and there is actually just no way back. But that's not how most people experience Neo Bowser City. I just have the anti-plot armor, but it's actually a very solid and unique track. Honestly, Moonview Highway is carried by its music. I mean, just listen to this. Yes, we're actually just gonna sit here and listen to this for a bit. This remix had no rights to be this good. Just for comparison, here is the original song. Yeah, if you just showed me this, I never would have thought that the song could be that good. As for the track itself, I really like the beginning section, where the fastest path is to go on the little hill and trick. It's challenging and very satisfying to get it just right. But unfortunately, the rest of the track is not that interesting. I guess it's neat that the boost panels have a different layout every time you play here, but it doesn't add too much to the complexity of this track. What does add to the complexity is the moving cars, moving coins, and item boxes, and the boost panels. See, the boost panels give a huge advantage to frontrunners, not just because you get to constantly be in a speed boost, but also because you can mitigate damage from being hit if you plan it well. This play was made by TWD98, or Troy, when I was racing against him. And even though Moonview Highway is naturally one of the best front-running tracks in the game, doing smart stuff like this actually matters. In this race, if he had not done that, I was close behind with triple red shells, and I thought I was about to end his life because he would have perfectly fallen into the position where I could easily take him out. But because of this smart play, he got away and he beat me in this race. Smart plays like this actually matter more than you think in Mario Kart, and I'm glad that this track gives you tons of opportunities to be creative. .3DS Rainbow Road feels like a mix between N64 Rainbow Road and Moonview Highway. It's a short track where being in a top position is absolutely busted since there are no shortcuts, and it has plenty of boost panels to keep the front runners moving fast, and you can reduce damage from being hit. But unlike those two tracks, I feel like there's just a bit more tech that you can do as a front runner. For front-running tracks, I don't like when it's so easy that it's boring, because then playing in the front is free, and playing in the back is hopeless because you can't really make a comeback. So I'm glad that driving here as a frontrunner is at least somewhat interesting. And also, this is one of the prettiest rainbow roads. Like, just look at the road texture. It looks really, really cool. And the music is quite good too. I think the moon section is a really fun concept, and I wish we had more of this. We pretty much only stay here for like 10 seconds, and I get that it's called Rainbow Road, not Moonview Highway, but still, I enjoy having something fun that makes each Rainbow Road unique. I also wish this track was longer, or at least had some more stuff to do in the back of the pack, since comebacks are very, very difficult here. I mean, I actually had an entire race once where I held first without using a single item. And I wasn't even trying to do that. It happened by accident. It was just because it was the correct play at every single moment to not use my item. So yeah, basically this track is carried by being pretty to look at and having great music, but playing on it is not always the most memorable or interactive experience. Madrid Drive is, without a doubt, the best city track in the game. I would say this is the only city track that I look at on the select screen and I'm like, yeah, I really, really want to play this right now. I could argue that Los Angeles Laps and Rome Avanti have a better lap 1, but Madrid Drive is consistently great for all 3 laps. I would say only Athens Dash can really compare in having 3 fun laps. Somehow that's just not true for every other city track. And the music on Madrid is great. We go through so many different places, which is what a city track should be. and there are several fun shortcuts that are different on all the laps. I love when a track has very technical driving, and Madrid has tons of cool stuff. The lap 1 shortcut can be done with a mushroom, but it can also be done without a mushroom, and this is not that easy at all, but it is very satisfying to pull off and extremely important to do at the start of the race. Lap 2 has a very precise shortcut through the crowd where you basically have to line it up from the blind ramp beforehand, and it can easily get trapped with the banana peels, so you have to decide if the risk is worth it. Then the next item box is crucial, as this is how you will be taking the next shortcut. If you stay high on the glider, you can land in the fenced off grass area and take a mushroom shortcut. Then on lap 3, we have this relatively small grass shortcut, which would be boring, but then you can bonk the wall to precisely and barely charge up a purple mini turbo, and this next one is not great, but it's still fun. If done just right, you can hop over a bit of the railing. This track just has so many fun and memorable parts, and I would say the only downside to this track is that it really does feel like a city track for part of it. There is one section where you're just going between two walls and going straight, and it happens twice on the track, but luckily it's not that long. I don't think Madrid Drive is perfect by any means, but it's definitely the best city track by far. When there are so many sections, but they all feel the same, then a track is just being difficult to memorize because it wants to be difficult. But when each part feels different and fun in its own way, and it's still kind of difficult, to give you a challenge, then that's the city track format at its best. Also, there's a secret glider long cut where you can get coins. There's no reason to go here, but I'm glad it exists. We actually have seen funny Easter eggs like this in previous tracks, like on London Loop, where you can just kind of go into this section on the wall and it doesn't really make sense at all because that's not a shortcut. There's no reason to be there, but I'm glad these little Easter eggs actually make some sort of sense in the newer tracks. Boo Lake looks and feels so good. For a track that spends a lot of the time being flat and brown on a dark background, it is amazing that the track feels this good to play on. Honestly, this is a bit of a track design hack, but I think it works unbelievably well, and Nintendo should definitely do this more. See this part where the track changes elevation? About half of the track is like this. It just slants up or slants down for no reason in particular. But this makes each section distinct, and even as someone who has played on Boo Lake hundreds of times, this still tricks my brain into thinking the track is way more interesting than it probably is. And especially for new players, this sort of design helps to make each section feel distinct and makes the layout easier to memorize. It's a win for everyone. I call this the GBA Mario Circuit effect. Such a simple track has no right being as fun as it is, but I think part of what makes this track so memorable is just that part of it is elevated for no reason at all. Love it! Boo Lake also has a really fun shroomless shortcut. It's not that much faster than going around, but it doesn't have to be. It's just fun to take, so I'm gonna take it every single time. The ending section is also quite fun, as you can take the railing to get considerably less airtime. It's really tough, and you're going to fall off a lot before you master it, but often this is the difference between getting hit or staying safe. It's basically a shortcut. I feel like Boo Lake should not have been this good, but with the GBA Mario Circuit effect, plus two very fun sections on the track, I think that's honestly all it takes to make me really like a track. I know it doesn't make that much sense, but when it comes to Mario Kart, I don't mind letting my monkey brain do the thinking. Speaking of slanting a track for no reason and having most of the track not actually be that fun, ladies and gentlemen, Mute City! Okay, if it was just that, Mute City would be way below Boo Lake. But you know why this track is great. We have absolutely one of the most epic and intense soundtracks in the game on one of the most beautiful tracks in the game. There was so much love put into the design of the track and the background, and this is a perfect use of the anti-gravity mechanic, because everywhere you look, it's a cinematic experience. And on top of that, this track just feels so fast to play, especially on 200cc. In fact, on 200cc, the only section that you could argue is kind of slow, where the turns are not very sharp, it makes these turns feel sharp because it's actually hard to do this section. I also love that there are no coins on the track, but instead, all you have to do to get 10 coins is stay on the purple panels for a bit. And you don't really have to go far out of your way to do this. The track really wants to make sure you're always moving as fast as possible, as you would in the F-Zero games. To add to this feeling, the first off-road shortcut is such a sharp turn with so little room afterwards and you can hardly see where you're going that it's actually difficult to stay on the track. The one sharp turn on this track makes you feel like you're losing control, and it's a thrill. Then we have the ending shortcut, which you can take with a mushroom and then hold down to float over the rest of the track. You're not going that fast here, but it feels so fast. In fact, you can even take this without a mushroom, which I somehow feel like was not intended, as it's a super finicky one, but it is doable, and it's one of the toughest shroomless shortcuts in the game. This track would rank higher for me if it spent more time, being an interesting driving experience, because a lot of it is really just boost panels and it's not that interesting, but it more than makes up for it by nailing that F-Zero feel and being such a unique track. Honestly, it's such a crime that Nintendo put so much love into Captain Falcon's track without actually adding him into the game. And come on, this Mii suit, this doesn't cut it. Dragon Driftway was always just an okay track for me. The theme is fun, and the music I think goes really well with it, but I'm just personally not a huge fan of either of these. But one day, I pretty much had my entire opinion on Dragon Driftway flipped upside down because of one thing: the gap jump shortcut. This shortcut is genuinely risky to go for. It's extremely difficult, and it's one of the most rewarding and fun shortcuts in the entire game. And first of all, I just want to say that it's so surprising that this is even possible, but you can truly do this with any combo. It's just really tough sometimes. And on 200cc, you don't even need to hop, which is just insane to me. And okay, for the rest of the track, it's just kind of alright. I enjoy charging several orange and purple mini turbos, and also getting the triple trick near the end, but that's about it. I spend almost all of my time on this track drooling, thinking about how good it's gonna feel to gap jump again. Wario Stadium. If you watch a lot of high-level competitive Mario Kart, you're probably sick of this track. It's definitely one of the most popular tracks in competitive Mario Kart, and for a good reason. It's a really, really good front-running track, and comebacks are insanely difficult. But if we ignore that for a moment, Wario Stadium is a really fun track where the amount of tech goes insane. You can do so many tricks on this track, but it's actually faster to almost never trick if you know what you're doing. Now, obviously, I'm not going to explain all the tech here, but just know that there is a lot, it's really fun, and it's really precise. It was also a great change to put water at the end of the track. This was not at all what the original version looked like, but this changes the optimal technique here from tricking into drifting, which is just a more interactive way to play in my opinion. And you can take this section differently depending on whether or not you have a mushroom for the shortcut. Time trialing Wario Stadium is always a thrill, and it's really tough to get a full run with no mistakes for all 3 laps. And even at a lower level, without all that tech, this track is still difficult in all the right ways. I remember one of my favorite tracks to play when I first started playing 200cc was Wario Stadium, because it just felt like a very difficult yet fair challenge. And the better you get at this track, the more fun it becomes, as it really rewards fast driving by letting you stay in first. And I don't even need to say it after Waluigi Pinball, but the music on this track is just so good. Rainbow Road, also known as Wii U Rainbow Road, is just such a fun track. I've definitely heard a lot of people say that this track is just alright and that it's not a great Rainbow Road track, but I personally disagree. I guess the space station section is a bit strange, but after decades of rainbow roads, I really don't mind the theme changing up a bit to not just be a rainbow the whole time. There's only so much you can do with that. And as for what I like about this track, for starters, the music here is one of the best in the game. Actually, if you go back and watch some of my scripted videos, the ones that are guides and not gameplay, you can get a feel for which music I like the most in the game. And Wii U Rainbow Road is a song that I've used a lot. It really gives a feeling of finality and success, which is perfect for a Rainbow Road theme. I also love that this is one of the most difficult Rainbow Road tracks pretty much in all of Mario Kart history. There are not many tracks in the game where it's actually faster to brake drift on 150cc because the turn is too sharp to be taken at full speed, and that happens twice on this track. Imagine slowing down. That's not in the spirit of a racing game. And if we're talking about 200cc, I guarantee you are lying if you try to tell me that you have never fallen off trying to do the beginning section, only to take it again, thinking you know what's coming, and then just falling off again. And if you ever go watch the 200cc world record, you'll know. You don't just suck at the game, this section was actually designed to just barely be possible. Another highlight of this track is the path switch shortcut. Because Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is so polished and Lakitu tends to pick you up whenever you try to do stuff like this, it's really exciting to see techniques like this in the game. And honestly, I wish there were more of this on other tracks. For me, the only huge flaw on this track is the cannon glider. Because of how this game factors in your distance to first place when it calculates your item probabilities, you can get really stupid items here. Like, you can get the bullet bill in fourth, kind of stupid. This was definitely an unintentional side effect of having this sort of item system, and I don't blame the track for having this, but it is a thing, and it's hard to ignore when you're playing real races. I mean, it's fun when I get these items, but then it's not fun when everyone else gets these items and I lose. It definitely makes the races a lot more volatile than I think they should be, and not in a very healthy way in my opinion, because a lot of it just comes down to luck at one item set. But for me, this is definitely one of the most memorable Rainbow Roads in Mario Kart, so it absolutely deserves this spot. I love the theme on DK Jungle. There are several different sections that look like they're leading you to finding the treasure buried in ancient ruins deep in the jungle. And in the end, that treasure is you get to take a shroomless shortcut with the friends you made along the way. Love it. This track seems really simple at first, but it's surprisingly technical once you dig deep. It starts off with a super bounce, which is basically a shortcut when you consider how much time this saves, and then there's the jungle section, where you can either go around for coins or take this shortcut in two different ways. There's the shroomless version, where you just drift onto the glider panel, or the mushroom version, where you can take the grass instead and get a purple mini turbo. Then we have the mini turbo air hop on the boost panels, and then the final shortcut. This section can get a bit toxic because of how easy it is to get hit, and then if you get hit, you'll probably fall off the shortcut. It's really rough here, but you do get a choice to go around, so I like that there is a safer route. Plus, the 3 coins here actually give you a good reason to take it a lot of the time. So overall, DK Jungle is a pretty fun track with lots of tech for you to learn. Alright, Sky Garden. Let's first make one thing clear. This is not my favorite version of Sky Garden. I guess there's only 2 versions of Sky Garden, so you could say this is my least favorite version of Sky Garden. I'd argue that this is just not Sky Garden. The original Sky Garden was completely different, both in feel and in the layout of the track. And it was always one of my favorite tracks. But with that being said, this version of the track is still pretty great. I like to compare tracks to their past versions because it is a way that we can see what sorts of things do and don't work when it comes to designing a track, and I like to highlight the creativity that goes into recreating a track for a different game. However, I'm not going to rank a track lower just because they made it worse than the previous version. I try my best to take each track at face value and only rank it in comparison to the other tracks that we have in this game. So if they remade the original Sky Garden, maybe I'd rank it higher than this. Or I don't know, maybe it would play worse in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for some reason, and I'd actually rank it lower. We don't know because we don't have that track in this game, so that track is irrelevant. I just wanted to point it out that I really wished we got that track in this game instead. But this version of Sky Garden is definitely still a great track. The music is iconic, it's very fun to drive at every single section, and there are plenty of fun shortcuts, which are all actually not that easy. The biggest shortcut on this track is on the final turn, where you can even take it without a mushroom. I am 100% sure this was intentional, as the off-road here gives you a really weird bounce as you enter it, which means you actually touch less off-road than you'd expect as you drift in. And if you've seen the world record, somehow it's even possible to take the other shortcut shroomless. This is bonkers and completely not practical in a real race, but I love that this is possible. I remember when this track first came out, I tried for hours to get this shortcut to work, and I could not make it faster than just going around. I love when Nintendo puts stuff in the game that is just almost possible, and often is possible, and that encourages us to explore and have fun with the game in our own ways. And I'm sure lots of people had the idea of taking this shortcut, but no one was really good enough to make it work until years after the track came out, when the pro players were finally able to do it. Now, the main thing I dislike about this track is how the ending plays in a real race. It's really cramped, with items flying everywhere, and then everyone squishes into the shortcut at the same time. Then if you get hit off the glider, you actually just lose. It can be funny and make for exciting and hilarious endings, but it's also just a mindless bloodbath, and it does feel kinda luck-based. But overall, the track is so fun that I don't mind this part too much. And fun fact, you can actually see multiple Cloudtop Cruise ships in the background. This is such a fun detail, since the clouds and big leaves are very reminiscent of Cloudtop Cruise. And honestly, I wish Nintendo retroactively added Sky Garden into the background of Cloudtop Cruise and gaslit us into thinking that it was just there the whole time and we didn't notice. SNES Mario Circuit 3 really doesn't feel like it deserves to be this high. I don't know what it is about this track, but it is just so fun and so charming. This track definitely got a lot of criticism when it first came out, because it is an overly simple design. I mean, it looks decent on its own, and it's pretty much the closest one-to-one adaptation of a retro track. But for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, that just felt kinda lazy. Obviously, we have tons of retro tracks in the game. The game is mostly retro tracks, but if the layout of the track was originally too simple, then the new version would always spice it up in some way. And I just want to remind you that this is in the same game as Mute City. So yeah, on the surface, I get the criticism. But honestly, I feel like this track is already really good, even though it's just flat and road and off-road. It's actually just as simple as a track can be, but look at what happened when they redesigned Donut Plains 3. Technically, this track is way more interesting than the original, but I just don't think it works. I appreciate the changes that they made, it just doesn't work that well. Donut Plains feels a little dark and muted, and a lot of the bumps feel unnatural to drive on, which is a problem that stems from trying to make the track look and feel realistic. But Mario Circuit 3 is just an upscaled version of an old track set in the classic Super Mario Bros. World, and this art style works amazingly well. I honestly think this is one of the most beautiful tracks in its own way, because it just perfectly accomplishes exactly what it's going for. Yeah, maybe it doesn't fit with a lot of other tracks in the game, but again, the entire DLC kind of looks like this, so it's time to get over that. Half of the game looks like this. There are two art styles in this game, and that's okay. Now, as for how this track plays, it's one of the strongest bagging tracks in the game, as there are shortcuts on literally every single corner. I don't really mind that though, because every shortcut is really fun to take, and you cannot try to just take them all, because then you'll start missing item boxes or missing some of the more important shortcuts. so it really takes a level of planning to properly make a comeback. Front running is really not good on this track, but it's also not completely unviable. The biggest shortcut on this track can be taken with just one mushroom, so everyone besides first place has a chance to take it. And because the positions switch a lot from the shortcuts, it's possible first place has a mushroom too, so first place can sometimes take it too. And I don't really mind when front running is bad on a track. Obviously, that doesn't feel that fair and balanced, but that's kind of the whole game, so I just like if at least front running is fun. This track is full of turns where you can charge up precise mini turbos, and it's actually not that easy to get them all just right. And I think this track is even more fun to front run on 200cc, where it's still a bagging track, but a little bit more balanced. I feel like when a track has just one shortcut that is really important, it can make the track feel very luck-based because it's all centralized on how well that shortcut goes for you. But when a track is completely littered with shortcuts, you have to start choosing which ones to take and when to make a comeback. So SNES Mario Circuit 3 actually takes quite a lot of skill to win on, and every race tends to feel different because each moment is important, and there are so many different decisions that you could have made along the way. And the player who makes the best combination of decisions on average tends to be the one who wins. This track, honestly, for being a bagging track, really doesn't feel that luck-based to me. I feel like if I'm in a room that's not as good as me, then I will win. And if someone else is also the best in the room with me, then we'll just win together. It's really skill-based. And I've had so many memorable races on this track, like casually smuggling a star into first place as I'm yapping about Super Mario Kart, which I have no clue what I'm talking about when it comes to that, and also that one time that I actually thought I won the race, but barely got passed on the line by someone that I couldn't even see. These amazing moments are just defining to Mario Kart and make the game so fun. Next up, we have some of the best tracks in the game. These are incredible tracks where I love pretty much everything about them. They're super fun and interesting to play, they're beautiful to look at, they have good music, and I get excited when I see these on the track selection screen. Yoshi Circuit is a legendary track. Come on, it's in the shape of a Yoshi! I'm not even mad that GBA Luigi Circuit did it first, where this track is shaped like a Luigi. Cool, but Yoshi Circuit does it way better. The drifting on this track feels so good, and there is fun tech everywhere. From the gap jump into the mushroom shortcut, which is the optimal way to take this section, to hopping over the grass behind the Piranha plant and then taking a little grass shortcut again afterwards. It's actually such a difficult track to drive perfectly for all 3 laps. But unfortunately, Yoshi Circuit has a bit of a weird reputation in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe because it's unexpectedly one of the best bagging tracks in the game. And I say unfortunately, not because being a bagging track is a bad thing on its own, but because it really takes away from what makes Yoshi Circuit fun. You can get incredibly far behind, and in fact, you should do this on purpose because if you get a bullet bill, you can take it through the waterfall shortcut and it just lasts for 12 seconds. Not to mention that there are 2 other great bullet bill extensions, and having a speed item or invincibility item benefits you so much in the entire second half of the track. I really think that there are not enough shortcuts or important decisions to be made when bagging here. Like, it's not that fun of a bagging track, it's just that bagging is unreasonably strong. And I think the more fun way to play this track is front running, but that's unreasonably bad. This is definitely more of a high level complaint though, as I do feel like at most levels of play, Yoshi Circuit is quite a balanced track. Especially at lower levels, there's a ton of tech that you can use to gain a huge lead if nobody else is quite as good at the track. So I can't really say this track is too flawed, and it's still one of my favorite tracks for many of its great qualities. Royal Raceway is such a beautiful, fun, and balanced track. The original version of Royal Raceway actually looks completely different. It shares the same map layout, but it just doesn't feel like you're driving the same track at all. The modern version feels scaled down, and I'm glad that they removed a lot of the hills so that you can actually see more of the track as you drive. Time trialing this track on 150 or 200cc is incredibly fun. There are so many precise mini turbos you have to get. There's the Shroomless shortcut where you hop into the boost panel ramp, and there are just shortcuts all over the place. But most of all, I love playing on Royal Raceway because I truly feel like anything can happen. And not in a random or luck-based way, but I feel like there are so many decisions to be made on this track, and a bad decision can snowball into a disaster, while a good decision can reward you immensely. For example, all 3 item boxes are placed at a section where you could skip them to take a shortcut. And the shortcuts are balanced in a way where usually you should just get the item, but not always. It really depends on the other players around you and which choice you think is safer. And the item boxes also make you question how important it is to get a double item box, because at the second item set, taking the shortcut only gets you 1 item, and at the final set, it's actually the same thing again. It doesn't look like it, but going for a double item box here loses a similar amount of time compared to the shortcut from earlier. And so taking the single item box can actually completely swing a race. And not to mention, you sometimes have the third option to take the biggest shortcut on the track, but skip the item boxes entirely. Then there are 2 straight sections, which surprisingly are not boring, because you're always sniping people or dodging items here. Every part of this track is so fun to play, and front running is rewarded, but comebacks are also possible because of the shortcuts. The only downside I have for this track is that the optimal driving, while challenging at first, is ultimately quite easy to do well. I don't usually speculate too much about new tracks coming to the game, but right before Wave 6 of the DLC dropped, my number 1 pick for a returning track was DK Mountain. I mean, it's not my favorite track or anything, but it's definitely one of the most memorable ones. And no, the huge mountain face is not the most memorable thing about this track. It's actually the fact that Daisy is still paying for therapy after the crime that took place here. No, it's the gap jump shortcut. I remember discovering this shortcut on my own as a kid without the help of the internet all the way back on the GameCube. And I'm not saying that to brag, because anyone who played this game a lot discovered it by themselves. And if you're younger than me, maybe you discovered it for the first time in Mario Kart Wii. Not a lot of tracks are like this, and honestly, I'm glad it's rare, because otherwise it wouldn't give you such an incredibly rewarding feeling for discovering something new. But when they brought this track back to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, any avid Mario Kart player could have told you that this shortcut exists, and honestly, we'd be pretty mad if they removed it. So of course, it is possible, but wouldn't it be legendary if they did it again? This is what I discovered on the very first day of playing the new DK Mountain. And it wasn't just me who discovered this, it was everyone. Then we found out you can do it with a mushroom to take a shortcut that actually saves time. Then we found out you can do it without a mushroom and charge an orange mini turbo. Then we found out you can do it like this. Nobody expected anything like this to be on the track, but it's there. And it's just barely possible. That could not have been an accident. So once again, we say thanks Nintendo for recreating this amazing experience I had as a child, but now for millions more players around the world. And it is once again on DK Mountain. The rest of the track is not outstanding, it's just pretty good, but this gap jump shortcut, and now also the discovery of this rock shortcut, will forever be synonymous with DK Mountain in the minds of Mario Kart players. Both shortcuts are so fun to do, and that alone makes this track fun to play every time. Big Blue is definitely one of those tracks that you play for the first time and think to yourself, wow, Mario Kart looks like this now? And also, the music is just incredible. I'm really tempted to just stop talking and let the music play, but you can go listen to it on your own time. I highly recommend it, because every time I listen to this, it makes me feel things. This track also makes perfect use of both anti-gravity and the section track concept, where every lap is different, to take you through such a beautiful, futuristic landscape. And to match the F-Zero theme, this track is always focused on keeping you going fast. The pink panels get you to 10 coins easily, and then we have boost panels, conveyors, a water stream, a cannon glider, boost panels on conveyors. How could they have thought of that one? And then the ending has this sick double path switch technique, which is such a blast to do every single time. And of course, I have to mention the huge shortcuts that are possible on this track thanks to the floaty physics. On 150cc, we have 3 shortcuts, 2 of which are at the start, and 1 is at the end of the track after the path switches. These are cool, but they're nothing compared to the gigantic shortcut you can take on 200cc, which basically skips all of lap 2. And it's not easy to get this just right. The most amazing thing, actually, is that this is also possible on 150cc if you do it just right, and also use the fastest combo, which means it's pretty much just a time trial technique, but that is just incredible stuff. Unfortunately, this track is a bit short, and lap 3 is super volatile because of the broken item set going into the cannon glider, followed by a bunch of walls where it's really easy to get hit and not be able to do anything about it. The concept of this track is pretty much perfect, and with some small changes, honestly, Big Blue would be one of the best tracks in the game. Surprisingly, there are not many forest-themed tracks in this game. Wild Woods is not only special in that it is a rare type of track, but it also executes this concept extremely well. Just like Wario's Gold Mine, this is one of those tracks where you are not experiencing it to the fullest if you've never stopped to take a look around. There is so much love and detail that is put into these surroundings, and it really makes this feel like this is a place that is actually home to an entire community of Shy Guys. And what a wonderful place to live. I mean, they live right next to the coolest shroomless shortcut in the whole game. This is maybe the only shortcut where I've ever thought to myself, yeah, I know exactly how this works and what my controller needs to do, but I doubt if I can ever get my hands to do that. In the end, it wasn't as hard as I thought, but it still might be the hardest shortcut in the game that has practical use and does not feel like whether or not you nail it is just a matter of luck. And the rest of the track is also really difficult. In my Mario Kart Pro Guide video, at the very end, I had this idea to show me doing a time trial with all the techniques I'm using at every moment listed on the screen. You know, just to show a glimpse of what all these advanced techniques actually look like being used all at once. But I'm gonna be honest, it took me a while to think of a track that is so densely packed with a wide variety of advanced techniques. And in the end, I knew it had to be Wild Woods. This is one of the most fun tracks to time trial because it tests you in so many different skills and with no breaks in between. A lot of things you wouldn't expect to be that hard from just watching are actually very, very hard. Any Mario Kart 8 Deluxe player who has not mastered Wild Woods can tell you that this set of turns after the glider is just a prayer. Forget riding the little ledge, just taking a good line that doesn't send you flying to the left is already difficult, and the only way to grab the double item box is to not aim for it, because you know you'll aim wrong every single time. And as someone on the other side, I can tell you that there's just something so incredibly satisfying about being able to nail all the tech on Wild Woods. Electrodrome is a master of its concept. I'm gonna be honest, the layout of the track and all that stuff is not amazing. It's not bad, but it's definitely not what makes Electrodrome incredible. Electrodrome looks amazing. It has great use of its anti-gravity section and the music. Oh my goodness, this music is so good. And it's also so different from the rest of the music in the game. I don't think I'm knowledgeable enough about music to be able to describe to you in words what is actually so good about this. But I know there's some musical stuff going on here, and I know it's there. It sounds good for specific reasons that I cannot describe. Also, in case you missed the thing I said about Music Park, well, it's true on this track too. Not only do the piranha plants bob their head to the music, so does your character. And there's even this section where the music changes and it fits perfectly on the track and still sounds amazing. And fun fact, this is the only track in Mario Kart that has a one-word name. It's also the track that people get wrong the most. It's Electrodrome, not Electrodome. And don't be ashamed, I used to think it was Electrodome, and I was surprised to find out it was not. But instead of admitting I made a mistake, I think I was actually right, as I am about everything. But I shifted timelines in the multiverse, and lots of people remember the same thing as me, which is not evidence that this is an easy mistake to make, but it's evidence that I was right all along, and all these people shifted timelines with me. And I will call this the Mandela effect. So I can quickly point to this as the reason why I've actually never been wrong in my entire life. Anyway, if Electrodome was just about its visuals and music, I would rank it much higher, but the gameplay and decision-making on this track is, unfortunately, just average. The split path is a cool concept, but they really should have made both paths the same speed. The green path is just so much slower that as long as you're not at an immediate threat of being hit, you should pretty much always just take the pink path. But we cannot forget that Electrodome has one of the coolest time trial world record strategies in the entire game. On 200cc, you can do a Genswa glider to take the final shortcut and clip an invisible wall that turns you around so you can keep racing, and then do it again on lap 3 to finish the race backwards. One of my favorite achievements in this game is that I have successfully pulled off this shortcut for a video, and it is every bit as satisfying as it looks. Just wait till I'm the first person to get it on all 3 laps, and then Alberto beats me. Sunshine Airport is another masterclass in concept. There's just something that feels right, that feels great about playing on Sunshine Airport. Unlike Electrodome, it's not flashy, it's just exactly what it needs to be. It's calm, it's relaxing, it's just Sunshine Airport. We go from the airport terminal onto the tarmac where we inspect the tires and inspect the plane, then we go to the runway, increase speed, and take off. After the journey, we gently glide back down to the runway. From the very first day I played this game, Sunshine Airport was somehow one of the most memorable and fun tracks. But if you really analyze it, there's just not much going on here. It's one of the simplest tracks in the game to drive, there are not that many turns, there's pretty much not a single difficult thing to do on this track. But it's just a vibe. It's where you go to chill out. Mario Kart is hectic, it's stressful, it's chaotic and exciting, but it can also just be relaxing and just be a good time. And the track design adds to this feel in more ways than you probably realize. Have you noticed that Sunshine Airport tends to give relatively peaceful races? That's because the fastest path through the track only gets you 3 item boxes, no double item boxes. If you want double item boxes, you have to sacrifice a lot of speed to do that. And if you want to take the main shortcut on the track, you have to skip another item box for that. So the item boxes are there if you want them, but the track is subtly designed to have fewer items in play. And honestly, there's not that many shortcuts, so we don't really need that many items. Let's all just chill out and have a good time on Sunshine Airport. But if you're like my first ever competitive Mario Kart teammate who just loves Sunshine Airport, well then you can trick on the airplane wing, and then you can select 50cc so you can do this. Sunshine Airport! I'm just a broken record at this point. I didn't mean to make these 3 tracks next to each other in the ranking, but it just turned out this way, okay? So here we go again. Rumble Volcano is a master of its concept. I'm sure that sounded a lot better the first time I said it a few minutes ago, but it's true again. The concept here is that a volcano is falling apart under its own eruption, and we're just trying to finish 3 laps as fast as possible, because that's what we do here in Mario Kart. We have this really jagged and bumpy road, turns that are really difficult to take, and then we see this vast wasteland surrounded by lava, or magma. I don't know, I forgot the rules for how those 2 words work. As you race, pieces of the road start to crumble away, making the track more and more punishing. Now, this track is definitely not what it once was. In Mario Kart Wii, Rumble Volcano was iconic, but for a different reason. It was arguably the most broken track in the entire game. You could do this respawn shortcut, which saves several seconds. You can do the rock hop shortcut, which saves several seconds. You can do an ultra shortcut by going onto the rock on the side and repeatedly abusing the game's checkpoint system to complete 3 laps. And now we have none of that, which is a good thing, right? It's definitely more fair and balanced, but it lacks a bit of the charm. Luckily, we do have a few things to make up for it. The biggest shortcut on the track is one that you'd never even spot unless you were looking for it, and even then, successfully making this shortcut is really difficult. But I really like this, not just because it's satisfying to do, but because the whole point of this track is that it feels like it's broken and falling apart. So of course, there is no perfectly designed shortcut for you to take. The shortcut is janky and hidden and difficult to take, and I think that works really well. And then on lap 3, so much of the track falls away that you can take another shortcut at the very end. And honestly, I'm surprised there isn't more of this on the track. I think if Grumble Volcano was a DLC track, maybe they would have done a Peach Gardens and changed lap 3 entirely. And if there's any track where that makes the most sense, it is Grumble Volcano. The whole point of this track is that it changes as you go. And even if they didn't have a big change like what I suggested, I would even appreciate some sort of shortcut or alternate path that only appears on lap 3, but not as a result of the track crumbling away, but maybe some pieces of rock float to the surface of the lava. Yes, I looked it up just now, and it's lava, not magma. Regardless, the track is still really good as is. There are technically 4 split paths on the track, which gives you plenty of decisions to make, and it's just a really fun track to drive. GBA Mario Circuit is a relatively simple track. Despite this section not providing much to the gameplay, I actually really enjoy that they have this raised anti-gravity section, as it stands out and separates each section of the track. But ignoring that gimmick for a second, this is a pretty basic track that functions almost exactly the same as SNES Mario Circuit 3. There's a wide, curvy road, lots of off-road, and you're only limited by the walls. And while this is a pretty simple concept, it actually works really well to create fun and exciting races. Just like Mario Circuit 3, this track is a bagging track because there are shortcuts everywhere. However, I do think it is just slightly better than Mario Circuit 3 in pretty much every single way. And also, it's much better than Donut Plains 3 in every single way. First of all, it's a very short track, which is good for a few reasons. Unlike some other bagging tracks, you really have to start paying attention and try not to fall too far behind starting at the beginning of lap 2. And also, because it's short, front-running this track can actually work if you get lucky enough with not too many blue shells or shocks. And that's actually not too uncommon, because this track's final item set is a single box, and it's so late in the race that it doesn't even affect anything on lap 3. I mentioned near the start of this video that Donut Plains 3 really feels like it's lacking items, but GBA Mario Circuit never feels that way, despite also having fewer items than most tracks. And this is because you can take all the shortcuts on the track while still grabbing every single item box, which is not true on Donut Plains. On Donut Plains, taking all the shortcuts means you get no items at all. So we get the fun of using items to take shortcuts without items being too overpowered. And the track being short, plus all the shroomless shortcuts you can take as a frontrunner, really makes frontrunning actually viable on this track, even though it's not favored. And this track also features my #1 favorite shortcut in the entire game. You can just use one mushroom to take the biggest shortcut on the track and then hop onto the glider to stay safe away from everyone, including the shock, and then drive over the wall for another shortcut. I remember just being bewildered the first time I found out this was possible, and it's actually not that easy to do either. You won't find this in the time trial world record because it's technically slower than driving on the ground, but staying safe, especially on lap 3, can be extremely worth it. I don't take this shortcut often, but when I do, it can be game-changing. It is diabolical that Nintendo forced a bunch of gamers to take a bath. The last time I touched bath water was when I made this purchase online for a friend, as a joke. Squeaky Clean Sprint is such a creative and silly concept executed extremely well. There's all the bathroom stuff in here. We have toothpaste, slippery towels, a drain, sponge, toothbrush, sink, bathtub, drain, a fan that blows you, and this is the first track in the game that actually made water physics fun. There's not that much of it, but the fastest way to take the bathtub section involves charging some mini turbos as you fall through the water, and this is incredibly satisfying to do. There's also a little shortcut you can take in the drain, which is pretty tough. And then on lap 2, there's this really cool and fast way you can take the sink section, which is not really worth doing on lap 1 because if you get bumped, that ruins your entire line. And then the toilet explodes in lap 2, and the Mario Bros are not around to fix it, so we can take the top path, which leads to a glider, which means you now get to take the sink section in a third way. And this also unlocks a side path with boost panels and more items and a little bouncy plant. And I forgot to mention, there's also another alternate path between this one and the main path. Squeaky Clean Sprint is one of my favorite tracks to play in time trials because there is so much tech and you have to be very precise. And this is really rewarding when you play online because the difference between fast driving and the most obvious driving is night and day. The track is really fun, and I would love to rank this track much higher, and I probably would have shortly after it released. However, it has become very obvious at this point that the drain section is just not that good. It is so cramped, and there are walls, and there are item boxes, so everyone is chaining their items here, and often dodging all this chaos is pretty much impossible if you're in the pack. And it's unfortunate, because that's pretty much my only complaint about this track. The rest of it is so fun. You want me to do what to Wario? Mount Wario is definitely one of the most iconic tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Other mountain tracks have you going up and down for 3 laps, but somehow this is the only one where you just go down the mountain. And it's a pretty obvious choice for a section track where each lap is different. And wow, does each section truly feel different. You start at the summit where it's mostly icy road and sharp turns leading into one of the most fun gap jumps in the game. Then we have a cave section followed by Wario's Dam because when it's a Wario themed track, you know the only reason he owns this property and rents it out for Mario Kart races is because he's also turning a profit in some other way. In this case, he needs the energy generated from water to power Wario's gold mine. And why is it on an icy mountain? Well, that's to cool down the heat from Wario's crypto mine. Unfortunately, we don't get to race on that track because it's not a real track, it's just an NFT of a JPEG of the track. Then we reach the tree section where Wario has been mercilessly clear-cutting forests. I mean, how do you think his gold mine was built? And then an overpriced ski resort. And by the way, if you've ever been skiing or snowboarding, the turns in this section genuinely feel like skiing down a difficult hill on the mountain, where you can easily get too much air when changing direction and completely lose control. I have no idea if this was intentionally designed this way, but it is cool. And all the while, the amazing music is trying to keep up with how fast you're going as it changes each lap. This track is just so fun from top to bottom. The challenge is mostly in driving precisely, as there are plenty of sections where it's easy to mess up really bad. But the only thing I feel like is missing is that there are not really any alternate paths worth taking, and you just don't make a lot of decisions as you race. And especially in the skiing section, I feel like the whole thing with skiing is that you keep picking a path until you ultimately end up in the same place in the end. But overall, an amazing track that is definitely one of the best. DK Summit is unlike any other track in the game. I was never a huge fan of having DK Summit come to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, not because I don't like the track, it was one of my favorites in Mario Kart Wii, but more because I didn't expect all the fun elements of DK Summit to actually make it here. But here it is, in all its glory. We have half pipes that you can take to skip turns. The moguls section is somehow even jankier than before, and the gap jump shortcut, it's also jank. You can get bumped off or hit mid-shortcut. If you fall off, you just fall forever. Lakitu, more like Slakitu. And there are several ways to take the shortcut. There's the hop method, which is the easiest. There's the drifting method, which is the fast way to do it. And if you have a mushroom or more, you can hop off the shortcut and save yourself with smart steering. Is this extremely jank? Yes, of course it is, and it's amazing. If you have a bullet bill, you can take this shortcut super duper fast and make a huge comeback. And if you have the shock, you can end everybody's life right before the shortcut. This section of the track is so stupid, but it's so iconic, and I love it. But that's not even the jankiest part of Jank Jank Summit. The final half pipe just doesn't work sometimes. Who turned off gravity? I think I was right to worry about this track showing up. All the fun stuff did show up, but Nintendo tried their best, but it's still janky. And also, the music is just great. This is just great. This is DK Summit in all its glory. It's a completely faithful recreation of the original, and I wouldn't have it any other way. SNES Bowser Castle 3 was a huge surprise when Wave 6 of the DLC dropped. A lot of the older Bowser Castle tracks were pretty much the exact same format. It would be a flat track with lots of right angles, mostly walls on the side, or sometimes you can fall off too. There might be ramps with fireballs, the occasional thwomp, and that's it. Randomize all these elements, and you instantly have a dozen Bowser Castle tracks that all feel mostly the same. But somehow, this track blew away all expectations, and they brought out every trick in the book to make sure that this track was loved. The music got way more intense, the track is brighter, there's a slanted anti-gravity section for no reason. There are alternate paths up top with boost panels, we're going upwards, we're going downwards, this track just cannot be flat or it'll be boring. Then we ended off with some elevation so you can trick off the thwomps. This was possible the whole time? Why is there not more of this in the rest of the game? And they also added thin paths next to the off-road patches so stuff like this is possible. And also, this is possible. And also, this is possible. And it's the fastest way to finish the race on lap 3. This track just has it all. It's difficult to drive well, there's a really fun shortcut, there's super advanced tech that is not practical in real races, there are cycle-based elements, alternate paths, the soundtrack is amazing, and it is beautiful. This track has some of the best graphics in the entire DLC, and it definitely looks like it belongs with some of the base game tracks. The only reason I don't rank this track higher, despite being actually perfect, like, I'm not kidding, this track is actually perfect, it's because of what makes me enjoy a track. This track just sort of has everything. It does everything well, but I don't feel like it really emphasizes anything in particular. Everything on this track is great, but it's just not really the best at anything, you know? It doesn't stand out to me in any particular way, and so the races on this track, while exciting, don't end up being the most memorable. And so I do expect that nearly everybody ranks this track very highly. It's going to have a very high average rank among a lot of people, but I doubt that many people actually have it as their favorite. Wii Rainbow Road is the final track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. No, it's not the final track on my tier list. Please, you can't stop watching now. It's just about to get good. Please, I beg you, I'm saving the best for last. And we're almost there. Okay, Wii Rainbow Road is gorgeous. It has incredible music, it's so fun to drive, and honestly, this might be the most iconic Rainbow Road track of all time. So it's only fitting that the best Mario Kart game of all time ends with this track. Yeah, I said it. Mario Kart Wii is the second best. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. I would never try to upset the Mario Kart Wii fanbase. You guys scare me sometimes. And also, they really didn't have to add this, but when you fall off on the track, it has the same animation as it did in Mario Kart Wii. And that really shows the love that went into recreating this track for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I think this track plays really well in this game, and a huge reason why is because of the alternate paths. Unlike Mario Kart Wii, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe also has coins. And when designing a track, you want to give people a reason to take the slower paths, but you don't want to just put item boxes there all the time, because then it becomes too much. And this is one reason why I think having coins is very healthy for this game. It might seem like an annoying mechanic at first, especially with the existence of the coin item, but that's a whole different thing. That item doesn't technically have to exist for there to be coins in this game, and I truly think that at least having coins on the track encourages you to make a lot more decisions as you race, instead of just always taking the same fastest path. And Wii Rainbow Road has several alternate paths you can take, many of which are made more useful because coins exist. I do feel like, though, that the track is a bit overscaled, and because of that, you're rarely at risk of falling off, which is not really how a Rainbow Road should feel. I remember playing this track in Mario Kart Wii always felt sort of dangerous, like the road just wasn't wide enough and you could easily fall off if you make a small mistake. I think the track could definitely be like 10 to 15% smaller and it would still feel great to race on. Plus, it's currently the longest track in the game. But unlike another long track like Maple Treeway, which is just long, Wii Rainbow Road feels like you actually have a lot to do and a lot of decisions to make on every section of the track, so the track really doesn't feel as long as it is. Alright, are you ready? Cause I am so excited for this section. This video has been so long, but we are finally here. These are my top 10 favorite tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and if you don't agree with this, I don't care, because I'm just excited to talk about them. Do I even need to say anything? Even people who don't play Mario Kart will recognize this music. Coconut Mall has transcended Mario Kart, and somehow Nintendo did the impossible. I think they made this track even better in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe compared to the original. As you enter the mall, there are 3 spots you can trick on, and then we follow that up with a mushroom shortcut where you can bonk the wall for an orange mini turbo. And this next part is pretty precise as you mini turbo trick off the green ramp, take a sharp turn, then go low for tricks on the bumps. Okay, sounds like I'm doing a play-by-play. You'll see why in a sec. After the next turn, you drift up to the glider path and charge up a purple mini turbo to take a shroomless shortcut over the corner, barely dodge the car, and finish the lap. But that's just one way to drive this track. Depending on the direction of the ramps and depending on your items, placement, coins, and which lap you're on, you have so many choices for what to do at every single section. And all of it is fun and challenging to do. Coconut Mall is a super balanced track. It favors front running a lot, but comebacks are still very possible because of the bullet extension zone and huge motion glider shortcut. It feels janky to play at times, especially if you get bumped into weird sections of the walls, but honestly, that is faithful to the original design of the track, so I don't even care. And people have complained about the escalators being turned into ramps, and yeah, that's sort of weird, but also I like this because this is way more accessible, especially if you're unfamiliar with the track, or playing on a small screen, or you can't see that well. Unlike me, I don't even need to see to end your life. Coconut Mall is also one of the most fun tracks to practice and master on 200cc, as it's very difficult and every wall is just a death sentence. Driving a successful lap feels so fast and so satisfying, and the music really adds to the pressure. Also, when taking the motion glider shortcut, make sure not to hit your head and pass away. Koopa Cape is a fan favorite track in Mario Kart Wii, but I have to be honest, I like Mario Kart Wii, I just never liked Koopa Cape that much. The music was really good, but the track felt overscaled, and with how unique the track layout is, with so many shortcuts, I didn't really like that first place doesn't get to do any of them. But Koopa Cape in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe feels perfectly made for this game, and solves every single issue that I had with the original. Even without any mushrooms, you can take 3 shortcuts in one lap, which is only 1 less than if you had mushrooms. And every single shortcut, mushroom or not, is very satisfying to pull off. Just like Coconut Mall, I think the strategy balance on Koopa Cape is perfect. This track heavily favors front running, but comebacks are extremely doable because there are so many shortcuts. But the shortcuts are not broken, it really feels fair, and it keeps things interesting for every player for the entire race. You're never safe in first, and there's always hope for a comeback, but comebacks are not that easy. And the remixed music is incredible. There are actually different versions depending on which section of the track you're on, and I especially love the underwater theme, which I also loved in Mario Kart Wii. Everything I just said already makes this track incredible, but somehow there's more. There is always an alternate path on this course. Some have items, some have coins, and some have both. I know that some of these are not truly an alternate path, it's just a half pipe, but it's still a decision you have to make about the cost versus the benefit of taking a route that is not the fastest one. Every section on this track is asking you to either do a fun driving technique or make an important decision, and somehow there is no truly useless path on this entire track. DS Mario Circuit is just one of my favorite tracks, and I swear I'm not being biased. I love Mario Kart DS, but this was actually one of my least favorite tracks in that game. So why do I love it now? Because the Wiggler, who is sleeping on lap 1 and 2, comes out to play on lap 3! Just kidding, that's not why. Well, it's part of why. Why I love this track is basically there are 7 shortcuts, and every single one is just so fun to do. Well, except this one. But each shortcut has a little nuance to it that tickles my brain in just the right way. So first up, we have this one, where you need to hop in before using the mushroom. It's pretty basic, but what happens next is you're driving full speed at 2 double item boxes. You have to pick one, and you can easily get hit or not get an item, so you have to really pay attention. Next up is the most satisfying shortcut, if you take it the way the world record does, which is like this. Look at how much you have to dodge, and even then, you can very easily pop out into the off-road on the other side. It's a great blend of risk and reward, and it's actually possible to nail this 100% of the time, it's just difficult. Then we have another shortcut that is actually pretty tough to align for if you just took the previous one, which again leads straight into the items, so you have to pay attention and make sure you get one. Then we have this sharp turn shortcut where you go into the off-road and release an orange mini turbo, followed by another one where it's so hard to get the right alignment so quickly, drift in, then mushroom after you land, otherwise you get a huge pocket of air that slows you down. Then just to top things off, we have another huge shortcut on the next lap. Honestly, if this sounds like too much, it probably is. DS Mario Circuit is so incredibly fun, but pretty much only if you're bagging. Which you should, because this track favors bagging so much. And people love to hate on bagging tracks and say that they're all about item luck, but this track is genuinely difficult, especially when bagging. And that's not something I can say about most bagging tracks. If you are skilled at these shortcuts, you can actually just catch up faster than most people. This means you can tank what would often be a race-ending situation and still make the comeback in the end, because it's not luck-based. I'm 100% serious when I say that DS Mario Circuit is one of the tracks that I most consistently win on. I don't know the stats, it might even literally be my best track in recent history. I bag every single time, and these incredible results would not be possible if bagging was just a bunch of luck. I hate that I feel like I have to defend bagging to justify why I like this track, but what can I say? I love bagging on DS Mario Circuit. I honestly would rank this track even higher if frontrunning was more fun, or even just a little bit viable, but oh well, you can't have it all. When bagging, this track is definitely the best blend of fun and rewarding for skill in the entire game. When it comes to the theme of a track, Yoshi's Island is pretty much perfection. This track has its own unique starting music and unique ending music. And it also has a great Yoshi-themed soundtrack. And each section of this track just feels so different and memorable. And I really think that the simpler and more cartoonish art style of the DLC tracks really suits this. This track looks so bright and colorful, especially the view from the starting line and from the final glider. There are lots of references to the Yoshi games in the background, there are special enemies, and even the coin, which makes a unique sound and has a Yoshi icon on it. Another huge part of what makes Yoshi's Island so fun to play is how many little decisions you need to make as you race. There are several small shortcuts you can take in the first half, and the coins are always placed just slightly out of the way. So whether you're front running or bagging, there are always decisions to be made about which path is better to take. It's also really great that none of the shortcuts are that big, except for the one at the very end, which is huge, and you can take it with just one mushroom. Shortly after the glider, there is a question mark cloud, and if you hit the cloud, a red bridge will open for everybody, and driving on this bridge is basically the same as taking the off-road shortcut with a mushroom. This sounds simple at first, but it actually creates completely unique dynamics. The cloud is very difficult to hit, which I love. It is not just difficulty for difficulty's sake. Because it's so hard to hit, lots of people just won't go for it, and we hope that somebody else gets the cloud for us. And not going for the cloud is actually to your own advantage, because it's a bit faster to take the optimal line instead of aiming for the cloud. However, if nobody hits the cloud, then we all lose, and whoever has a mushroom now gets to come back for free. If you've ever heard of the prisoner's dilemma, this is very similar to that, but in Mario Kart. And in fact, if you are the player with a mushroom, it's actually better to not hit the cloud, because then only you can take the shortcut. In my opinion, this is one of the best design mechanics in the entire game, and putting it at the end of the race, on top of what is already a huge mushroom shortcut, is just perfection. And okay, it's not entirely unique, I guess, as there are other shortcuts in this game where somebody else can open the shortcut for you. For example, there's the wooden board hazard that was introduced in the DLC, which is used on Ninja Hideaway, Daisy Circuit, Athens Dash, which is actually not a shortcut, and Paris Promenade, but the one here is useless because it's off-road and you'd need a mushroom to get through anyway. There's also the Triforce shortcut on Hyrule Circuit, but the one on Yoshi's Island is just way better. I could not have come up with this myself, so I have immense respect for the designers who created this track. I never hear anyone talk about Ribbon Road being an amazing track, but I know you Ribbon Road enjoyers are out there. This is a really popular track online. First of all, the soundtrack is one of my favorites in the entire game. The colors are so bright and nice to look at, and the design of this track had so much love put into it. If you take a moment to just look around on the track, there is cool stuff everywhere. It's like a kid's messy bedroom if that kid was the biggest fan of Mario Kart of all time. And I feel like this track was designed by a huge fan of Mario Kart, because this track just has everything fun about Mario Kart all put into one track. It has sharp turns, bumps and ramps you can trick on, lots of off-road shortcuts, and then we get to the wavy road section where you can trick on the waves, and the waves actually add difficulty to the toy block shortcuts on the side. Well, most players view this as difficulty. Meanwhile, speedrunners view this as a challenge in optimization. Can you drive fast enough to get all the right wave cycles and plan out a perfect route onto the shortcuts? Well, it only took the entire lifetime of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but it has been done. And Pi has an incredible video on it. This is not even to mention 200cc, where the wave cycles and shortcut techniques get ridiculous. Ribbon Road was a track that I liked from the very start. The difficulty provides a challenge, but it's not that difficult if you don't want it to be. It's like this track comes with a difficulty meter, and it's only as difficult as you choose. You could just do very simple driving where you charge up a purple mini turbo, but the boost overlaps with the boost panel. But if you increase the difficulty, you can go for more optimized mini turbo releases around the turns and take safe lines onto the shortcuts where you mostly just ignore the waves to make sure you can make it. Or you can make things even tougher and go for all of the most advanced strategies, which are risky and genuinely difficult, while watching the wave cycles to make sure that what you're doing won't send you flying off the edge. And let's not forget, back on the Game Boy Advance, Ribbon Road used to look like this. That's just a city track. Okay, those times were different, and obviously I'm not saying it was bad, because it was still a great track for its time, but the only similarities between this and this is the red road and the minimap. That's it. It's amazing how much of an overhaul we got for Ribbon Road, and now it's one of the most creative and exciting tracks to race on. Alright, listen up. Piranha Plant Cove is in the top 10. After uploading one of my IQ test short videos and reading the comments, I realized that many viewers here either don't own the DLC or just have not played enough Piranha Plant Cove to have the layout of Lap 3 memorized. And I get it. It's a DLC Wave 6 track. This game has been out for basically 11 years, and this track has been in the game for 1 year. This track is very forgettable. The layout changes every lap, and it's hard to memorize. The color is super dull. The music is not that great. It's a water track. There are just so many things to not like about this track. So I completely understand if most of you would not even hesitate to put this track in mid-tier, or even lower. I would not be upset by that, because it makes sense. And when the track first came out, I thought that's where I would put it. But my job here is to be good at Mario Kart, win races, and help y'all get better, you know? So when DLC Wave 6 dropped and I played Piranha Plant Cove for the first time, honestly, I was a bit annoyed that I felt like I was obligated to learn and practice such a long and weird track. It's the same way I feel about a lot of the city tracks that are not that good. But then, I tried something. Yeah, remember how you can float in water? Well, there you go. An underwater floating shortcuts. 10 years, ladies and gentlemen. It only took 10 years for Nintendo to realize, hey, maybe we can use water physics to do something that cannot be done without water physics. And like the desperate Nintendo fan that I am, I said, wow, genius. So there you go. There are 3 shortcuts on this track that use water floating to its best. And I know this is not entirely new, as Mute City and Big Blue also have big floating shortcuts, and we also just have that floaty physics in the DLC with Sky High Sundae, 3DS Rainbow Road, and Wii Rainbow Road. But if you think about it, it doesn't really make sense why you can float on all those tracks, and there is no indication that you can float, which is why you've probably fallen off of this part of Sky High Sundae, not expecting that you can turn your vehicle in midair. Piranha Plant Cove is the only one that actually uses water to create shortcuts, and they are challenging, and they are incredibly fun. There's also this insane one that I've nailed a few times online, where you land on the wall and clear the rock by way more than usual, saving a huge amount of time. It's very risky, and it took so much practice for me to be able to just land it sometimes. Shortcuts aside, pretty much every section of this track has some interesting technique you can do to just be a little bit faster than someone driving it for the first time, and I just love that. And I wish this track was more fun for new players, because I know it's really just not. But at the same time, it's also nice that we have this high skill ceiling hidden gem of a track. Piranha Plant Cove is one of very few tracks that truly rewards frontrunning in the best way possible. And here's what I mean. Think about N64 Rainbow Road. It's great for frontrunning because it has no shortcuts, and it's so short that the shock and blue shell hardly ever show up. Meanwhile, Moonview Highway is also great for frontrunning, but that's because the boost panels make you go really fast even without using items. And I don't know, that's just kind of cheap? Like, it's not that hard to front run on those tracks because the track kind of does it for you. But on Piranha Plant Cove, you have to be skilled and work for it. Every single challenging technique you successfully pull off one by one will each put you ahead just a little bit farther. And also, there are hardly any coins on this track, so first place actually benefits from the coin item. Wow, an actual use for the coin item. At the highest level of play, you could say that Piranha Plant Cove is unbalanced, because the person in first just has too big of an advantage. But that's assuming everyone is actually good at it. When you play online, almost everyone you race against is not a pro level player on this track, because it's actually just a really hard track. So when I say this track is rewarding for frontrunning, that's what I mean. I don't mean frontrunning is simply powerful. What I mean is that the game actually rewards you immensely for being good at driving the whole track. And unless you're really good at this track, this game doesn't actually reward you at all for being in first. And in a game where bagging is often very powerful, maybe more powerful than it should be, I can definitely appreciate a well-designed track that breaks the mold. Alright, here we go. What can I say about Hyrule Circuit? Maybe a 1 hour 40-minute video about how I spent hundreds of hours losing to the greatest player of all time over and over and over until... Yeah, you'll have to watch the video yourself if you want to see what happens. Although I promise it's worth your time. But you guys gotta stop calling it the best video ever. I mean, you're right, but you're making me blush. Hyrule Circuit is the track that I have played the most out of any track. And if you know the story, you know it's actually not because this is my favorite track, but because this is Rod's favorite track, and I'm a sheep. If you expected this to be number one, well, I could definitely rank it number one in some things. I think it perfectly captures the feel of The Legend of Zelda, even just with the design of the outside of the castle, not to mention the music being one of the best in the game. Let's just say there's no way I could time trial for hundreds of hours while listening to Baby Park. Then we also have the custom Deku Piranha plants, the bats are also from The Legend of Zelda, the rupee coins, and even the iconic sound effect when you open the shortcut at the split paths. And the track layout makes for very fun drifting and shortcuts, as well as just a balanced track that is good for front running, but comebacks are still very much doable. In my opinion, Hyrule Circuit may even be the best track in how it balances the need for good driving skill and planning your items to make a comeback. Because I'm good at both aspects on this track, I feel like I can always maintain a lead in first, but I can also always make a comeback if I need to. If you just look at the size of the shortcuts though, you might think this should be a bagging track. But something that adds to the balance is the final shortcut. You can take this shortcut with or without a mushroom, and it's pretty important to take. Meanwhile, the item boxes are all the way to the side. This sort of design naturally buffs running and nerfs bagging, as going for an item slows you down by a lot. Now, I could also talk about how horrible the design of this shortcut is, and there is a functionally random element to how fast you can do it, which I've complained enough about in the Hyrule Circuit video, but I'm sure lots of tracks have something like this that I just don't know about, and it only matters in time trials, so I'll save my breath on that one. I guess the only thing I don't like too much about this track is that the driving is relatively simple in some areas. There are pretty much only two things on the track that are actually difficult to get right in a race. Obviously, time trials are different, as you have to be perfect at all times, but realistically, this track is not that complex. We do lose out on some fun at the highest level because of that, but for most people, I'd actually say the difficulty of this track is perfect. I still remember the first shortcut I ever really struggled to learn was the shroomless shortcut on Hyrule Circuit. It was incredible. It blew my mind the first time I saw it in a video. Like, how can you do this without a mushroom on 150cc? And then it was a really fun process to figure out how to do it myself, and the shortcut does feel fair and forgiving once you know how it works. It's not easy by any means, but it is a very fun challenge for newer players. And honestly, for most of my time playing this game, I was not that good. I didn't have every section of every track memorized, like how to do it properly. So I still remember the feeling of seeing a track on the selection screen and thinking, okay, I need to focus on nailing this one section because it's really fun, but really challenging. I feel like even if most of a track is just okay, having one really fun section to look forward to just boosts my opinion of it when playing online. I mean, that's pretty much Dragon Driftway in a nutshell. And I know that most people are not going to pour hundreds of hours into practicing every Mario Kart track, so making them too difficult is a double-edged sword for most people's enjoyment of a track. Pro players love tracks with lots of difficult tech. I mean, that's why I love Piranha Plant Cove, but most players really enjoy when there is just one very challenging section on a track. So I appreciate both types of tracks, and I think Hyrule Circuit is a perfect version of this type of track. Mushroom Gorge is one of the most iconic tracks in Mario Kart history. I may be forgetting some here, but I think the only other contender for most iconic track is Coconut Mall. I mean, I guess Rainbow Road is way more iconic than both, but that's more of the idea of Rainbow Road in general, not any particular version of the Rainbow Road track. Regardless, there is simply no other track like Mushroom Gorge, where you spend so much time just bouncing on mushrooms and dabbing. The music is incredible, the track is colorful and fun, and I'm honestly really glad that Mushroom Gorge came with the DLC instead of being in the base game, as the cartoonish art style works way better for this track. And honestly, I think it looks a lot better than it did in Mario Kart Wii. It was a lot darker in that game. And before all the competitive players come out with their pitchforks to tell me this track is stupid, look, I know. It's extremely stupid. In high-level competitive Mario Kart, this track entirely boils down to what happens on lap 3 after this item box. Do you get a good item? What order do you get your items in? Does your item get stolen? Does someone hit you? Do you get target shocked on the mushrooms? Do you get hit going for the shortcut? Any of these things happening can be the difference between getting first or last. It's honestly ridiculous to put one of the biggest shortcuts in the entire game right at the end of the track. Sure, the Snowland shortcut is technically bigger, but it's definitely not as impactful as the Mushroom Gorge gap jump on lap 3. Because no matter how lucky or unlucky you get during the first 95% of the race, ultimately your race comes down to how the final 5% goes. And this is what we mean when we say a track is luck-based. People love to say that bagging tracks are luck-based because items are luck-based, but remember, items affect the frontrunners too. Red shells, blue shells, shock. You don't win in Mario Kart without getting a little bit lucky, no matter what your strategy is. So what actually makes a track luck-based? Well, the amount of good luck and bad luck tends to even out over the course of a whole race. So a luck-based track is a track where one moment is way more important than the others. Tracks with a huge shortcut at the end are mostly focused on how lucky do you get in that one moment. So these tracks are very luck-based. But that's not just for bagging tracks. A race on N64 Rainbow Road, or Moonview Highway, is mostly decided by what happens in the first 20 seconds. And after that, it just comes down to blue shell luck. In that sense, you can say that some of the best front-running tracks in the game are luck-based. I mean, I wouldn't even argue with you if you said Piranha Plant Cove is luck-based, because at the highest level, the race is mostly decided by the end of lap 1, since everyone is skilled enough to drive it very fast. And I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that Mushroom Gorge is just so iconic, and I have so much nostalgia for it, that I don't care if it's really luck-based. It is very luck-based, and that's not a good thing. Honestly, ever since about a year ago, I stopped picking Mushroom Gorge online that much, exactly because of this. So I get it. But as a relatively new player, yes, I'm not that new, I've been playing for 3 years, but for an 11-year game that's kind of new, I am incredibly grateful that I got to experience Mushroom Gorge as a new player. I got to experience it as a novice player, and I got to experience it as a pretty good player. And for all the pro players out there, here's what I want to say. For most players, Mushroom Gorge is the exact opposite of what you think it is. And it is a very popular track. Let me explain. There's a lot of tech on Mushroom Gorge. If you know how to super bounce on the red mushrooms, you save multiple seconds per lap compared to somebody who cannot do it. And this is not free. Pro players find this easy. I now find this easy, but this is not easy. Drifting off a ramp can so easily send you in the wrong direction if you're not familiar with the physics of how drifts start, and you have to hold the correct direction in midair, and not to mention, just hitting a bounce trick is not even 100% consistent for many players. This tech is actually quite precise. And then, charging up a mini turbo for the gap jump requires a very specific setup to be consistent, and then you have to actually get the mini turbo at the correct location and not be facing the wrong way. It's really hard. It took me 2 days of practice before I could do this shortcut just semi-consistently, only, of course, to mess it up every time in a real race because of the pressure. It's at the end of the track. It's difficult. And you can do even more strategies depending on your skill level, giving you lots of decisions to make throughout the race. Remember how I was gushing about Piranha Plant Cove being super skill-based? That's Mushroom Gorge. Remember how I said on Ribbon Road you can choose your own difficulty? That's Mushroom Gorge. Remember how Hyrule Circuit is perfectly balanced because a skilled player can keep a lead, but also make a comeback? That's Mushroom Gorge. For a new player, Mushroom Gorge is easy, fun, and memorable. For an improving player, Mushroom Gorge is a difficult track, that is continuously rewarding as you get better. And for a good player, Mushroom Gorge is one of the best front-running tracks in the game, and also one of the best bagging tracks in the game. Because it's not actually rewarding you for front-running or bagging, it's rewarding you for being skilled at the track. Mushroom Gorge is not just iconic, but it's also one of the tracks that rewards you the most for having a variety of skills that are important in Mario Kart. If you're a pro player and you don't believe me, go play in a lower level online room and pick Mushroom Gorge. I can guarantee you that you will get first place, no matter how unlucky you get, because the luck actually doesn't matter. The skill difference is insane. Mushroom Gorge only becomes a luck-based track at the very highest level of play when everyone is about equally skilled and they all can do everything perfectly every time and all know the best strategy. But almost nobody in the world plays that version of Mushroom Gorge. And as someone who has now reached the level where I can agree with the criticisms, it is unfortunate that one of my favorite tracks has lost a bit of its charm. But I am so glad that I got to experience what makes Mushroom Gorge one of the best tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Waluigi Stadium is my second favorite track in the game. Didn't expect that, did you? Well, some of you can probably guess my number one pick, so maybe this isn't that surprising. I've said before that Waluigi Stadium is my favorite track in the game, and it was. And it was no joke. It is not a coincidence that I created my channel in March of 2023, the same month that DLC Wave 4 released, which of course included Waluigi Stadium. For some background, I started playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in the middle of 2022 exclusively at my friend's house on his Nintendo Switch because I didn't own one. And we played a lot leading up to the DLC, and then a lot after Wave 1. We only played a bit here and there during Wave 2 and 3, and by the time Wave 4 came out, we had pretty much stopped playing very much. But of course, we booted up the game again to try out the new tracks, and immediately I was like, wow. DK Summit is in this game? Okay, Waluigi Stadium felt really awkward to play. The turns were sharp and slippery, half-pipes had just made it into the game a few months ago, so I had no clue how to do this part properly. And honestly, I was never a fan of Waluigi Stadium in the past. I played it on the GameCube and also on the Wii, and it was just alright. But as I played this version of the track, because it felt so awkward to drive, I never felt like I was doing anything correctly, so I went and learned from the world record. Now, keep in mind that this was also the same time that the stats in the game were rebalanced. I was a Baby Rosalina main because my soulmate is the Mini Turbo stat, and I knew enough about the stats to predict that Peach would be the best character in the game, so I picked Peach on Mr. Scooty and started practicing. Yes, this was literally my day one main after the balance patch, and somehow I've made it back onto the same stats after so long. Now, not only did this combo feel amazing to drive, which really made me love this game even more, but I found out that Waluigi Stadium is really fun. And then I realized that this shortcut can probably be done shroomless, and I wanted to figure it out myself. So I literally spent hours, days, just time trialing Waluigi Stadium, trying to find the best and most consistent way to make it through this shortcut with the purple mini turbo. I did get really good at it, but throughout all my practice, I realized something. This shortcut is not even the highlight of the track. The highlight of this track is the whole track. But I'm not even kidding when I say that you actually spend more than half of this track in a speed boost. But unlike some tracks that just have a bunch of boost panels, you have to work for these speed boosts, and it is not easy. Because this track is slippery, it's very difficult to replicate the same driving lines every single time. So not only is it fun because it's technical, it's fun because you have to adapt to your exact positioning each time. Sometimes you have to brake drift or take a backup strategy. It's just so dynamic. And even the section that you could argue is boring, which is on the half pipes, is still fun. Timing the air hop to stay up is easy, but it's not easy to grab two items at once, as you have to plan your ascent early to get the right timing. Everyone who watches Shortcat knows that Shortcat can never get the two items on Waluigi Stadium's half pipe. And then you also have to time your alignment as you exit the half pipe to avoid taking too wide of a turn or missing a boost. The reason why I like Waluigi Stadium so much is because you actually have to do something that is at least somewhat challenging on 100% of the track. I don't think this is true on any other track in the game. And even if you're incredible at Waluigi Stadium, your position for certain track elements will actually change, not just depending on how well you are driving, but also depending on how many coins you have. Every section of this track, especially the Shroomless shortcut, feels like there are levels to how well you did it, and you can always do it just a little bit better. And honestly, that's my favorite thing about driving on a track. I want to move. I want my movement to matter. I want techniques to feel rewarding when I successfully execute them. I want to make decisions, and I want to feel like I'm going fast. I know that Waluigi Stadium is not the most popular track out there, and that's fine. You really need to practice this track a lot before it starts to get fun. And throughout my 2 years of making videos about this game, I hope my love for this track has shown, and maybe just a few more people have opened up to how great this track is. And it really does make me happy to know that several pro players I've spoken with have ranked Waluigi Stadium very highly. It truly does feel like you can just get better and better at this track with no limit. I mean, the world record is so far ahead of everyone else because one player called F decided to specialize in this track and push it harder than anyone had ever done. And I forgot to even mention, the music is great and chaotic. The track is beautiful, or as beautiful as it can be for just being brown. And there are several alternate paths that actually have some use. I've had so many incredible wins on this track, including a long winning streak where I only got first place on this track for about 6 months. Waluigi Stadium is an amazing track. It's one of my favorite tracks, and it's arguably the most difficult track in the entire game. I mean, come on. After Waluigi Stadium and Hyrule Circuit both did not take the #1 spot, honestly, who here is surprised? Cheeseland is my favorite track in all of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Sure, Rainbow Road may be the most iconic track in the Mario Kart franchise, but the most iconic track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is without a doubt Cheeseland. Even the most casual player who has just watched a bit of high-level Mario Kart could tell you that Cheeseland is this strange, mysterious land where driving forward is bad. I have so many short videos about Cheeseland, and based on the view counts, you guys love them. We love Cheeseland around these parts. But naturally, as these videos reach a wider audience, I also get so many comments on them saying that bagging is no skill, cheating, not in the spirit of the game, cheap, lame, and that I could never win a race if I had to race normally like everybody else, which is why I resort to these unethical tactics. First of all, I love these comments. They're wrong, but I can see why people think this, and it's not my fault. It's Nintendo's fault for making bagging so strong. Thanks, Nintendo. Second of all, I'm just one person. Short Animal Family Unite! Go out into the comment section and defend me! And besides, if bagging is no skill and all luck, then why do I always win on Cheeseland? Just something to consider. If you think I can somehow consistently get luckier than 11 other people, then I don't know what to tell you. Cheeseland is skill-based, but it's just a very funny kind of skill. And I have said before that Cheeseland is not exactly a racetrack. You want to kind of disregard your position counter for most of the race, as you cannot really monitor the progress of a race like on most tracks. Just because I'm dead last and half a lap behind first, it does not mean I'm losing. I'm actually winning. Cheeseland is hilarious. We have the iconic bullet extension zone that makes your bullet bill go for 12 seconds, which pretty much guarantees that you can smuggle a good item into at least a middle spot, if not a top spot. We have 6 huge shortcuts on the track, plus 2 little ones, and all of these shortcuts are really fun. This track actually feels well designed for every single item. Obviously, mushrooms are great, and we already talked about the bullet bill, but what about the golden mushroom? Well, it lasts the perfect amount of time to do the triple shortcut at the start, which is not even that much slower than the bullet extension. And it also lasts the perfect amount of time to take the final 2 shortcuts to end off the race. The speed items just feel great to use on this track. But wait, doesn't Cheeseland remind you of another track? You know, one that's full of shortcuts, it is slippery road, it's one of the best bagging tracks in the game, it's even mostly yellow. Why is Dry Desert in bottom tier when it's almost the same thing as Cheeseland? Well, if you've watched the whole video so far and didn't just skip to the end, yes, I'm calling you out for that, you probably know that I'm not too concerned with whether a track is a front-running track or a bagging track. I don't care, both types of tracks can be good, and both types of tracks can be bad. And I think the difference between Dry Desert and Cheeseland is the perfect example of why a bagging track can either be terrible or it can be great. Because unlike Dry Desert, Cheeseland is actually fun. What does bagging look like on Dry Desert? Well, you can stay in the back until halfway through lap 3 because pretty much the only way to win is to take the final shortcut. But what about on Cheeseland? On Cheeseland, you can make the comeback at several different shortcuts or even make the comeback on lap 2 and successfully front run for the entire lap 3. It really just depends on how the race is going, what items you get, and where everyone else is, so you need to constantly make decisions about what to do with your items, and these decisions actually matter. And that's why Cheeseland takes way more skill. Your decisions actually start to matter very early on into the race. But okay, there are huge shortcuts on both tracks, so why is Dry Desert all about the ending, but Cheeseland allows you to make a comeback earlier and continue to hold on to that lead? Well, that's because front running on Cheeseland is actually fast. Despite all the shortcuts, there are also sharp turns all over the place where you can charge mini turbos, which means you don't get effortlessly passed by everyone. You'll get passed by some people, probably, but the better you are at driving this track, the fewer people will pass you. And driving on Cheeseland is actually really hard. If you watch the 150 or 200cc time trial, you'll see some of the most precise, craziest things in world record runs. There are so many advanced techniques, and like I said before, difficulty levels that you can choose while racing. But on Dry Desert, you spend most of your time just holding a really long drift. That is slow, which means everyone will pass you, and being a skilled player doesn't help you hold that drift any better than anyone else. Plus, front running on Dry Desert is not an important skill anyway, because you can just bag and win at the end. But on Cheeseland, part of why I can consistently get good results is because I adapt to the situation I'm in, and I often make the comeback very, very early if I think that helps my chances. So this tests my bagging and front running skills in the same race. You can't just say, I'm just bagging. Like, I actually race for an entire lap. You have to actually be good at that. But sometimes I do get to make the comeback right at the very end. And you don't just get lucky and have the perfect timing to steal first. This takes planning. In fact, I've also had races where I was able to successfully front run the whole race because I'm decently fast at driving this track, and obviously it does take some luck. I'm not saying that's all skill, right? It's a bagging track, that's understandable. But the few times I've tried to front run Dry Desert, I actually just get last because I'm guaranteeing that I'll be slow the whole race and I don't get to take the only shortcut that matters. And all this is without even mentioning that at most levels of play, Cheeseland is not nearly as focused on bagging. Instead, what you get is an incredibly dynamic race with difficult and precise driving, sharp turns, and lots of mushroom shortcuts that cause positions to switch all the time. Cheeseland is easily one of the first tracks where a beginner will start to learn that being in first place is not always the best, because you cannot get mushrooms to take the huge shortcuts. And this is a truth that is fundamental to so many Mario Kart tracks, and is part of what makes Mario Kart such a fun and appealing game with so much replayability. The fact that an epic comeback can always happen is why a race in Mario Kart can be so exciting from the start all the way to the last second, because you always have a chance. People love to say that Mario Kart is not fair or it's not a good racing game, because first place is not rewarded by being able to keep their lead. But if you just play a little bit of Mario Kart Online, you'll notice that the tracks that people pick are not the ones where you can keep a lead. Because remember, those tracks exist in this game. Mario Kart can be played like that. In fact, you can play Mario Kart with no items if you want to. Nobody does that because what makes Mario Kart fun is that the comeback can always be made. That is fundamental to Mario Kart, and that is why we all love this game. And yeah, maybe Cheeseland is a little sillier than the rest, but you cannot get angry that Cheeseland is one of the silliest tracks in the game. Remember, this track is literally called Cheeseland. And recently, we discovered that Cheeseland is even sillier than we thought, because you can do this. And it's not just a time trial technique. You can do this online to win races. Perhaps the most broken technique in this game has real, practical use on only one track, and that track is Cheeseland. You can even do it on any lap and change straight into the 12-second bullet extension. You can turn on smart steering, and Nintendo will take the turn for you. And it's not just that this track is silly and broken, but I've had so many great clips on this track. It's where I smuggled a shock into first place and then front ran for an entire lap. It's also where I was too greedy and got the shock shocked out of me, but I ended up winning anyway. It's also where I got a golden mushroom and couldn't use my next item, so I got the shock shocked out of me and ended up winning anyway. It's also where I got a shock dodge during the bullet extension, then got bumped off the track, then dodged another shock on lap 3, got trailed by first place right before the finish line, and ended up winning anyway. If you were surprised earlier to learn, I put Rosalina's Ice World so low despite being one of my most picked tracks. I pick it because I'm good at it and it's boring, but boring in a way that is most advantageous to the person starting in first. Maybe you like seeing me win here, but let's be honest, it's the same thing every single time. I don't have very many good clips to make on Rosalina's Ice World. I love the track, but it's not that interesting. But on Cheeseland, I have so many great memories. So many of my most favorite memories of this game are on Cheeseland. Cheeseland is the perfect representation of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It's chaotic, it's silly, it's just so dumb. But it is fun, and it's memorable, and it really does reward you for being skilled. But even then, sometimes you just lose. And that's okay, because no matter how good you are, everybody gets a chance to win. And that is Mario Kart. Alright, so here is my full tier list for every track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And I know you just skipped to the end to see this part, so as punishment, it does not fit on the full screen, so you cannot just pause the video here. And by now, you're probably annoyed and you've turned the volume down, so let's have some text on screen. You cannot get away. Don't even try. Timestamps are in the description if you want to hear my explanation of why I hate each track in this game. And now, please watch my Hyrule Circuit video. It's really good. That is all.